OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Alright, Monday morning, 7:30. You're very welcome along. This is OTB AM. We've got a full house. Kathleen's here. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Shane is here. Shane, how are you?
Good morning, how was all?
You're a bit bleary-eyed, Shane. You're up late watching the golf.
Watching the golf, and I thought this was a great decision. It's going to be really, really tight. Tommy Fleetwood's there, Nick Taylor's there, the Canadian, the home favourite. And then it just kept going to one playoff hole, two playoff holes, three playoff holes, then a fourth. And I was like, I just need to go to sleep. But I stayed up, and I'm glad I did, because 72-foot putt to win it for Nick Taylor. The Canadian fans going absolutely wild. One of his good mates as well, a professional player, is it Hadwin, was running on to celebrate with him and take photographs, and he was absolutely milled out of it by a security guy.
All right.
On the green as he was running towards his friend to give him a hug. I mean, cleaned out.
Can't take any risks, in fairness.
Yeah, it's true. But what a finish. And you had Shane Lowry there, and all the other Irish and English players, Ryder Cup teammates of Tommy Fleetwood, kind of supporting him at each hole. But yeah, I'm a bit tired. Didn't get to bed till about 1:30, I want to say.
McIlroy didn't do anything in the final day.
No, tied for ninth. And once again, disappointing final round, same as last week. Just a few shots that went missing in that final round, and I mean, considering where he was, I think he was only a shot or two off CT Pan heading into the final round. So he was in with a really good shout. Pan shoots a 2-under final round to just miss out in the playoff, but Rory faded, which is disappointing to see.
So the golf, it didn't make it into our performance rankings. Tom Cannon didn't make it into our performance rankings. He is taking some time to consider his options. England have made an approach to him. His agent is David Moyes' brother, who has been in contact with Stephen Kenny. And after this section of games is over, Kenny's going to meet Tom Cannon's agent, and they're going to have a conversation about Tom Cannon's future. Kenny is not talking about what that conversation will entail, but you'd have to say it doesn't look good.
No.
At this stage, it's like a young English player gets called up by England, doesn't come to Ireland.
Sense of deja vu.
Have we seen this movie before? Exactly.
Jim Crawford said in March, he said, this is not going to be a Jack Grealish, Declan Rice situation. And now all of a sudden you're like, this is going to be exactly that situation. Like, he missed the camp the senior camp because of tonsillitis. And you might look at this story and go, okay, did he have tonsillitis?
He did have tonsillitis.
Yeah, Stephen Kenny, to be fair, did say, look, I know how it looks, but he did have tonsillitis. So yeah, give him the benefit of the doubt there, I think.
And also, surely it's the sort of thing where they're not just starting to have these conversations. Like, these are conversations that have been ongoing for a while, and it's just now that the FA have popped up, things have maybe escalated a little bit, and the fact that it's coming out makes it seem more likely that it's going to happen.
And like, I think we all were scared about the fact that he was scoring too many goals in the championship. Like, he seems pretty good.
It's a terrible state of affairs when you're worried about your players performing well in the league and on the off chance that they'll then get them pulled away somewhere else. It absolutely is. And I think it actually should remind everybody about what the FAI did last week, was try and build a football industry, or the plans to the architecture and the apparatus required to build a football industry, and Kenny's talking about that in the papers today as well. So we'll come back to that later on in the week. Plenty of time for us to look forward to the Republic of Ireland. John Klein also not in our performance rankings. Would he be in red or would he be in green? Well, it turns out he's not going to be in green. He has decided that he is South African again, having been Irish, of course, and controversially picked for the last World Cup, but controversially left out of this one from an Ireland perspective. It now looks like he's going to be part of South Africa, so he will be in their green, just not our green. We'll talk with Quinny about that and Keith Wood about that later on in the week. If you've got a view on that, or indeed anything else that we're covering this morning, you can get us on youtube.com/offtheball. That's the YouTube channel that we broadcast on. You need to be subscribed to our YouTube channel to be able to leave a comment. We'll get to the live comments in a few minutes if anybody has any other recommendations or stuff that we've missed. You can also get us 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or you can get us at Off the Ball AM on Twitter. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock for you. The performance rankings are imminent. Martin Lipton's going to talk to us about the Champions League. We've got Sarah Donovan in the meantime. At 8 o'clock, Karen Duggan's going to talk to us about the little hiatus that the league goes on now, with a big lead for Peamount at the top of the table. And Cathal Dennehy is going to join us at 9:10 to reflect on Rashidat Adeleke becoming genuinely world class. The time that she ran when she won the NCAA Championship at the weekend, would have won silver in the Olympics. So that's at around about 9:10. We'll play a clip from the pay-per-view at 9:30. In the meantime, time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it acceptable to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performance was just lacked that intensity.
Yep, let's get straight into it. And I think we're starting in Istanbul, and UEFA being in the red. Of course, Champions League final in the Ataturk Stadium in Istanbul on Saturday evening. And Ger, you had an interesting journey to get to the stadium, let's just say.
Yeah, I didn't realise we were first up here, so I was like, oh, okay. Grant, we should start with this then. So the Champions League obviously was supposed to be in Istanbul in the year of COVID, and so I think a lot of people are surprised that last year was obviously a complete shit show where the French police were entirely unprepared for what was going to happen. They tried to blame the Liverpool fans for what happened, and ultimately it proved to be UEFA ticketing nonsense and also French policing nonsense, and nothing to do with the Liverpool fans whatsoever. And it was really, really dangerous. There were crushes, and it could have been a really significantly dangerous outcome. So everybody assumed this year things would run with, military precision and everybody would be very careful. But it turns out the Ataturk Stadium is really, really difficult to get to. There's two ways to get to it. One is a metro, which is relatively newly opened, which the Manchester City fans were told not to use because that was going to be how the Inter fans got out there. And then the other way was to go by road. And it turns out the road network isn't very good to get to the Ataturk. It kind of seems to be like on this almost like an island with one tiny road in and one tiny road out. And so everybody who went out on the buses got out there, and then there was loads of traffic. And so from about 2.5 hours, 3 hours beforehand, the roads out were basically blocked and you weren't going anywhere. Some of the Miguel Delaney had a great piece in the Independent yesterday where he was reporting on that the Man City fans who got the buses that they were scheduled to get were told, sorry, you're not going to be allowed to bring any water into the stadium, so you're going to have to give us the water now before you get on the buses. And then the sun beats down and everybody's on the buses with no water and they're trapped, and some people are puking on the buses. Oh. Some people are pissing out the windows.
Jesus.
There's no toilets, and it just sounds like it was not much fun. So all you got to do at that stage is get out and walk, and a lot of people got out and walked, and they walked on the roads, which it turned out are kind of like M50 style roads where you're literally walking in the road, and there's a hard shoulder, and sure, the only ones who are going up and down the hard shoulder are the cops who are flying. So you're if I didn't go this way, but we got a minibus. So there was 7 of us going out, 8 of us going out, and we got a minibus, and we got out with about what looked like an hour of a walk left to go, and our group got separated, and I'll explain why in a moment. And so some of them went that way with the M50, and they were like, you're literally walking on the dual carriageway, and there's traffic which is obviously choked except on the hard shoulder, which is full of cops who are like going past you, and it's like this doesn't seem very safe. Again, sun beaten down, and everybody's like a little bit anxious getting to kick off. So when we got to where we had to abandon, we bumped into some locals who were like, oh, you can just go, you can walk down there. It's 10 minutes. So took that at face value. And we looked down, and we're like, sure enough, there was like a very hilly Istanbul, a big kind of green park, which was like nice, and there was like families eating picnics and playing football, and like, oh, this is going to be a nice little gentle stroll up to the stadium. And then we got to a road and looked, okay, there's a bit of scrubland. It looks like we'd be able to walk up there. And again, that was when things took a little bit of a turn.
Just a bit.
Yeah. So there's no one around really, apart from like a line of ants, human ants in the distance, who are look like they're walking up what looks like a path to the stadium. But it turned out it wasn't a path to the stadium. It was just scrubland. And to get to the scrubland, there was you know those canals that they have in LA where there's never any water, and it's like there's drag racing.
Because they were in every movie ever.
Grand Theft Auto, yeah.
Exactly. But to get to the canal, there's like a sheer wall of stone that you have to slide down. And obviously we'd had a few beers, and this is going to be fine. So you get down, and you're like, oh, I can't get back up. There's nowhere to go here. So then for the next hour, basically, we had to climb through scrubland to get to the top of it. I've got some videos. Well, let's roll it there, Roisin. First one, please. So this is the very top. This is after 45 minutes of climbing. You're like, oh, we're finished. No, we're not finished. At the Ataturk, but not quite. Having climbed over the Shawshank River of shit to get up here. That looks much more steep than it does. Sorry, that doesn't look anywhere near as steep as it actually is in real life.
It's kind of remarkable we have you here this morning at all.
Well, it turns out a few drinks is exactly what you need. Otherwise, But that was the thing. In retrospect, like if somebody had gone over on their ankle, you were never getting out. You were never getting out. They weren't sending a helicopter in to get you. They were like, well, you're a fool. What are you doing? Why didn't you walk along the M50 like everybody else? So there's one more there where so there's another bit of scrub which I've got. Anyway, poison ivy and stuff that you had to crawl over.
Oh, yes.
This is actually up at the very top. That's the stadium. Well, kind of the stadium. And then here's where we came from. The whole way back up. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe
so you had to get across that road to get to the stadium.
Oh well, then there's like a tiny little ravine that you have to get over, and you're kind of in around the side. It was one of the worst organised things you're ever going to see. And like Istanbul is an amazing teeming multiplicity of human life. It's but it's definitely not the right place. There are grounds within the walkable access from the city. I'm not sure they have the right capacity. And then at the stadium, the concessions were apparently an absolute nightmare.
It's like only 2 for food or something in the entire stadium.
And one of the guys we were with had food and was like, the burger was raw, the sausage was raw. It was like completely inedible by the time that happened. So not enough water, not enough supplies, just a general shit show from UEFA again, who don't seem to care about the football fans. And after last year, you would have thought like they would have made a significant investment in making sure that this one passed off, but I don't know. Will it make a blind bit of difference?
Because on the TV, the stadium visually looked unbelievable. So you're thinking,
that's the thing I couldn't understand, like watching it, because I'd seen all the stuff on Twitter beforehand, and then they had their pre-match show, and I was like, this is incredible. That must have cost them so much money. Like even to get 3 acts alone, that must have cost like millions. And then you see all the chaos and you're like, well, why couldn't you put that into like water or toilets or all the very basics that you actually need to host an event of this
size? If the transport was like that in 2023, what was it like in 05?
I think it was the same. I don't think it
hasn't changed.
Well, I think there's been a metro built in the meantime. At one stage, right, we were walking out and we could see the metro in the distance, and it looked like the metro was entirely empty. I don't know if they dropped everybody off the stadium or a stop early, but it definitely didn't look like the metro was as full. And this was getting close to kick-off time, so maybe the Interfans had all got out early and it was taunting us anyway. There was definitely some empty train cars.
A lot of the reports that I saw were that anyone who did get the metro were actually probably the best off. Like, it wasn't particularly comfortable and it did still take a while, but I mean, who wasn't scrambling over ravines and getting stung by poison ivy like yourself?
Where's your sense of adventure, Ger? Actually, it was in retrospect really dangerous. In the moment, we're like, oh look, this is great. But anyway,
turns out you're bad luck for Champions League finals, Ger.
Well,
like you've been to both of those horrific ones the last couple of years.
As the one in Madrid was really straightforward and really great.
True.
Yeah, there were some fans breaking through in the Liverpool.
Is it Wembley next year? You can go again.
It is Wembley next year. Yeah.
At least
hopefully they won't have learned.
Like Wembley, so safe. All right, obviously no problems at Wembley ever.
Never. No.
There is a Europa League final in Dublin next year, so maybe Dublin is the place to go.
Hopefully the Dart is better than the Turkish Metro. Turkish not so delight.
Hey,
for Ger, yes.
Right, keep going.
Yeah, move on. Also in the red are the provincial losers in the hurling yesterday. I mean, just drama. They shouldn't be in the red, really, should they? Possibly.
This is just to shoehorn a reference to the hurling game before we get to Sarah Donovan, because you can't put Clare and Galway in the red after what they've done.
No, of course not. So this is more of a technicality. Let's talk about hurling and find some way. They're in the red because they lost.
Well, I mean, I feel like Galway will definitely feel like they're in the red this morning after the way, like, Henry Shefflin, he didn't do any media after the game yesterday apart from chatting to Galway Bay FM, and he said he'd just come out of the dressing room and he was like, I don't even know what to say to them. Like, they're just absolutely devastated. There is like a pall of gloom over the entire room, which you can totally understand.
Another 4 in a row for Kilkenny. And then I was sitting watching with my Galway father yesterday, and you can imagine when you're back from 8 points down and you get to the 2-point lead, he was buzzing in injury time. 75 minutes on the clock. And Padraig Mannion, of course, loses his hurl, kicks the ball clear. What else is he going to do? But of course, he kicks it directly to the Kilkenny sub Killian Buckley, and the rest is history. Buried in the bottom.
It's like, in commentary, when someone's like, they just need to kick it anywhere, or they just need to put the ball anywhere away from goal, and you're like, no, it's not just anywhere.
That anywhere isn't exactly accurate.
The away from goal is the point. Like, maybe don't kick it right back across your own goal again.
Yeah.
Like, so maybe the aspects of Galway's performance will be in the red, but the fact that they've come back from where they were in that game, the fact that Conor Whelan exploded into the championship in a meaningful way, and their side of the draw, like, it's going to be very difficult for them to get back to an All-Ireland semi-final, but it's not impossible at this point. So this is where Shefflin is really going to have to make his bones as an inter-county manager, because you've got to pick the dressing room up, but at the same time they're very, very close to being able to beat Kilkenny, and like we know that they have all the accoutrements required to be able to mount a challenge. Limerick are not as far ahead of everybody as they have been in previous years. There's a winnable All-Ireland left for all the teams who were contenders at the start of the year. They're still contenders now.
Yeah, 100%. And like, there were aspects of Galway's performance you can be pleased with, like the 6 points to 1 early quick start. Kilkenny, of course, come back into the game, and like Conor Whelan was brilliant. Was it 1-6 from play, and like there was a number of players in that Galway team. They do seem to let teams back into it. In the Dublin game, the last day out was concerning, but level at half time, and then you think Galway have it won, and it's just absolute gut-wrenching stuff. And the little quick handshake between Derek Ling and Henry Shefflin afterwards spoke volumes. Shefflin was clearly devastated.
The photo of Brian Cody from the stands the minute the goal goes in is excellent. Fair play to whichever of the photographers that probably had the camera just like trained on him for like those final few moments just to get any reaction possible.
Yeah, and TJ Reid, I think he had 1 miss from 10 shots, and one of those frees in the second half from downtown was just ridiculous. So yeah, can he be like straight into an All-Ireland semi-final? Galway have to, of course, play the winner of Tippin Offaly in a very difficult quarter-final, and then of course play Limerick in a semi-final if they do win that, so they're going to have to do it the hard way. But it remains to be seen. Clare, of course, again, like did very little wrong in that game, so hence why it's probably harsh to have them in the red. 123 to 122, and I suppose the talking point is the controversy at the end, the decision making from the referee. A couple of fouls that looked like fouls to most people with eyeballs. And
one was like a full-on rugby tackle.
Yeah,
it would have been a red card in rugby.
And then of course there's the whole madness of the ball being waved wide and the fans running on prematurely and everyone had to get back off. Just a bit of a carnage finish to that one at the Gaelic grounds in Limerick.
It feels like Clare did kind of leave it behind them watching it. I mean, there was like 5 or 6 shots that they missed just before half-time that all went wide, and that just felt like the moment for them to really like turn the screw on Limerick and get that lead, like a nice lead going into the second half. I feel like they'll definitely be more annoyed at themselves than Galway are annoyed at themselves. I think Galway probably did as much as they could, and it was just an utter shame that they let the goal in at the end, whereas Clare will definitely feel like they should have done more against Limerick. I
feel like Clare are now in Munster, they're the Mayo of Munster in terms of the Munster Championship. So they've lost now 6 finals since last winning in 1998. Like Tony Kelly, will he be the greatest player never to win a Munster hurling title? I don't know. Like, surely he's going to win one before he retires. But you have to say, like, John Kiley got everything right. In-game management was excellent. And Limerick, I know you say like the other teams have probably closed the gap.
They've definitely closed the gap.
Yeah, but you still, like, Limerick now in an All-Ireland semi-final against a Galway or a Tip, you'd still fancy them.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you'll fancy them. They do have injuries. They've got plenty of time for those injuries to come right. They said that Cian Lynch will be available, and John Kiley said there'll be no hungrier man in the world than Cian Lynch. But Christy O'Connor has a brilliant piece today in the Examiner. He's talking about the efficiency that Limerick had versus what Clare had. Clare's conversion rate was 48%. With the number as low as 42% in the second half. Limerick's was 65% in the same period. Clare's frees from harder positions, albeit, but their conversion rate from place balls was 45% compared to Limerick's 89%. They also dropped 6 short as well. Aaron Gallan from 12 possessions scored 1-3 and fouled for another 3 frees and could have had another goal as well. So I don't know how how much more Limerick can do, but it does feel as if teams are beginning to believe that they can beat them and getting closer to beating them, and have actually beaten them this year. Like, that's the thing, this isn't the unconquerable Limerick that we've seen before, which I think sets it up brilliantly. So 2, 4, 5 good hurling matches, guarantee of 5 good hurling matches, I think. Assuming that they can recover. That was the big problem, that like you put everything into this. This is the one reason why they could both be in red. We saw last year that losing the Munster final took so much out of Clare at the very end, when so they scraped through the next game and then just couldn't get up for Croke Park. So if the same thing happens this year, it'll be devastating for them.
Yeah, 100%.
If they're not able to perform in a semi-final. But, you know, like, they're going to be able to put things right in the semi-final against the same opponents.
Yeah, they'll have other chances for sure. Like Brian Lohan will probably be disappointed. Conor Cleary, like, his injury was a rough one for them to take, and then he puts Cian Nolan on Aaron Gillan, and Nolan struggled heavily, it has to be said. Gillan was having a field day, and then I thought they were maybe a little bit too late to make the switch. So yeah, a couple of decisions, as you say, Kathleen. Clare maybe left behind them a little bit. So yeah, both in red, Clare and Galway, but on a technicality. We'll move on to Amber and Manchester City. Give them the credit that they deserve, albeit with 115 potential financial breaches to come. And those charges, of course, we'll wait and see what happens with those. But on the pitch in Istanbul, not the dominant City performance that some people maybe expected, but again, it's a Champions League final. There's pressure. It's a treble on the line. Pep Guardiola's legacy at City at stake. And the Rodri goal was a lovely little finish. The De Bruyne injury, people were thinking this makes it interesting, and torn the hamstring off, so a few months out. Not that it matters necessarily over the summer. Stones was brilliant again. Both goalkeepers excellent. I thought, like, the chances for Inter Milan at the end, you're like, this is going to go to extra time. Lukaku, are we calling Lukaku's header a horrendous miss, as Chris Sutton called it, or an unbelievable save by Onana?
No, what are you doing?
It was straight at him.
Lukaku, no.
The power was excellent. And there was the defender jumping in front of the flight of the ball to maybe put him off slightly, so I thought actually even connecting with the header that well was something. But like 9 times out of 10, if you connect that well with the header, keeper's not going to save it.
There's a good story, I think it's in The Guardian this morning, someone's writing about it, about Guardiola, that he was in the lift in the stadium, I think going to do like media or something, and there was a TV nearby and it was showing replays of the Lukaku chance, and he was just like standing there staring at it, and someone asked him a question being like, you know, do you think he should have scored or whatever, and either he didn't hear it or he pretended not to hear it, and the reporter said he just like kind of blew out a breath and was like and walked off and got into the elevator, and they were saying you could almost see the like relief in his face. He knew like 9 times out of 10 that's probably going in, and that's
anywhere except straight at the goalkeeper, and it's a goal. Anywhere except straight at the goalkeeper. He literally, it's like the keeper is kind of I mean, it's not like it was a brilliant piece of goalkeeping that had him in the right position for where Lukaku was going to head it. It's like Lukaku was like, oh, the guy over there, I'm going to pass it to him. Oh, no, I'm not supposed to pass it to him. He's not on my team.
There was a nice little battle on Instagram. I don't know if people saw this, between Rio Ferdinand and Brandon Williams over the game.
I saw that Brandon Williams post something on his Instagram story or something, and
Brandon Williams said nobody wants a sloppy seconds, basically, which I presume referred to the 1999 treble. So maybe he'd had a couple of beers and he was feeling a little bit tetchy on Instagram, and then he called out Rio Ferdinand. Rio, bet you don't congratulate if you was a player. Keep the same morals. Snooze face emoji. Two face is boring. I don't know. Anyway, doesn't take away from City's performance and win and victory, and Pep Guardiola's it's hard to compare himself and Alex Ferguson, and I saw a lot of people doing that at the weekend, and that seemed to be the narrative. But what he's done with Manchester City, regardless of the financial stuff that we'll wait and see what happens, on the pitch it's been outrageous. He's built a team that could become a dynasty.
I just,
no?
You just gotta be careful penciling stuff in the future. We're always in the rush to go, this is going to be clear, they're going to dominate forever, but if Silva goes, if Gundogan goes, which is very realistic, and they couldn't control the game in the second half against Inter. Maybe that's because there's so much at stake and it's been so long in the build-up, but I don't know. Again, a little bit like Limerick, it felt like teams are beginning to find a way to play against Pep, and they're beginning to find a way to, like, Inter finished third in Serie A and created as many good chances in the game as Manchester City did, and it seemed relatively straightforward for them and their management team to work out, okay, press when we need to, make sure that we have incredible energy around the pitch, and obviously there just was a bit of a blunt edge, and maybe if they had a slightly better striker they would have scored, and potentially would have scored twice. So I'm just not penciling them in for a dynasty yet. I don't think Kathleen, were you talking about the previous treble winners, the comparison between?
Yeah, well, it was talking about Alex Ferguson and when he won the treble, and the fact that, like, the following year he made quite a few missteps in terms of, like, bringing players in and trying to, like, switch things up. And then it was talking about Guardiola and when he won the Champions League and they brought in Zlatan the following year, and how much of a disaster that was. Got rid of Esho, and how it took Guardiola almost like another season or two to actually kind of regain some sort of confidence or trust in himself. Like, he just didn't, it was almost like because he'd reached that pinnacle, he didn't trust the players in front of him in the same way he did to do it again. And the question was, well, what's he going to do now? Like you were saying, there's like 4 or 5 players that they're looking to re-sign on contract extensions this summer. Also another couple of players they're going to try and bring in. They missed out on Jude Bellingham, but there's a few others. What's the decision making process? Like, when you've reached the pinnacle, you've won the treble, where do you go? What do you do? How do you improve a team like that?
Yeah, I think actually De Bruyne's injury isn't just a no big deal. Like, he is getting to the stage of his career where ripping the hamstring off your bone is going to be really serious, and it might be Christmas before he's back in form. And then does he get back in form, and does he still have the same desire and drive now, having finally scaled the mountain and become one of the all-time great footballers in history? So I'm just not, like, obviously they have endless resources, we know this, but so do many of the other teams in the Premier League, and it depends on who ends up buying Manchester United. Like, this, and again, the repercussions for the allegations of the cheating and the cover-up that they stand accused of, that's obviously why they're not in the green. I think all of that, I don't feel like this is the beginning of a dynasty at all. I feel like this is a team who are kind of clawing over the line at the end.
Well, so to become a team of winners, you need to bottle the agony of defeat, which, like, those knockout stage exits to Lyon, Spurs, Real Madrid, the final defeat to Chelsea 2 years ago, they obviously bottled that. If they can bottle this, what Rio Ferdinand calls addictive feeling of winning, that's how you become a dynasty. Like, you have to bottle the absolute joy of this feeling. Zidane's Real Madrid, right, were vaguely or barely capable of winning a league and putting in the consistency over a couple of years, week in, week out, but were able to win back to back, right? Incredible stuff. And they were a European Cup dynasty by the definition of what you're talking about. But, like, it's just such a different competition. Let's wait and see. Fergus Kehoe in the comments. Jock Steen won a quadruple with a team costing next to nothing. Alex Ferguson won a treble with a team containing Ronnie Johnson and Jesper Blomqvist. But Pep, with his unlimited resources, is a genius. This is the argument thrown against Pep, isn't it?
Well, Pep is a genius. That's like, Pep is a genius. What he did at Barcelona and the style of football that he developed. His teams have played some of the greatest football ever seen. Like, that's like, oh, well, I'm a Man United fan and I can't appreciate anything other than. I'm like, come on. like, no one thinks Ferguson was a genius in terms of his tactical ability. What Ferguson could do was organise and manipulate and cajole and bully and force of personality turn Aberdeen into a team who was capable of stopping the old firm. So, like, these are different things, and it's okay for other people to be good at something that your team is also good at.
That's true.
Right, come on.
Yeah, let's go. Come on to the green, and we'll move on to Novak Djokovic, who, of course, won his 23rd Grand Slam title at the weekend, a men's record, moving him one clear of Rafa Nadal in terms of men's major, so now level with Serena Williams, one off Margaret Court's all-time record of 24. He's 36, still has chances to win it. Of course, Wimbledon being his next opportunity to break that record, Margaret Court's record, or equal it. And it was a good match. in terms of Djokovic's performance, because that first set tiebreak was probably the turning point. Djokovic, and I think Jenny Claffey said it to us last week, he's just unbelievable when it comes to tiebreaks, and he won that tiebreak 7-1, goes on to win the second set 6-3, and then the third and final set, as it turned out, 7-5. The first man to win all 4 majors at least 3 times as well, so he's taking these off. Casper Ruud will be disappointed, but another experience of a Grand Slam final for him.
It's just a pity the Alcaraz semi-final wasn't the actual final, because that was such a good matchup between the two of them, and it feels like this is kind of like the future versus not the past. You can't really call it Djokovic's past considering what he's doing now, but the getting slightly older.
Yeah, the sheer dominance of Novak Djokovic is just ridiculous. Yay.
So, good man, Novak.
I know.
Yay.
The villain wins.
Such a great hero for the world.
Yeah, Man City and Novak.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the other green, I think, because it deserves probably a couple of minutes extra. Rashidat Adeleke, you mentioned her at the top of the show, Ger, and she's just unbelievable. I mean, the numbers, as you said, and we kind of spoke about it before the weekend as well, this NCAA record and race against Britton Wilson, this girl who she's had a lot of battles with, a lot of defeats too, it has to be said, but extraordinary time of 49.20 seconds for Rashida to take 400 metres gold. It's on her home track in Austin, Texas as well. That knocked another 0.3 of a second off her national record for the event, which she's now broken for the 3rd time this outdoor season, which is incredible. It's only 0.07 seconds off Wilson's collegiate record. She finished at 49.64. It's outrageous. And you said, Ger, how those numbers compared to like, it would have been good enough to take gold at the 400 metres to the Europeans in Munich last summer, silver at the last World Championships, and a podium place at every single Olympic Games this century. It's the 3rd fastest time in the world this year, the 20th fastest of all time by an athlete in that event. So I mean, what's left to say about it? We promised she'd be in the green last week, but obviously she had to go and do this.
Adrian gave us a lot of hurt and hate the fact that we haven't done Adeleke more in the green, and he was like, if it's not there on Monday morning, I'm going to be having words with you.
We had to make the promise, and she earned the right to be there.
Alright, that's this week's version of the Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Off the Ball's Cash Machine.
So, Sharon Bradley was with her work colleagues on Friday when the cash machine call came her way. She answered the call just in time, and the celebrations may have been going on all weekend. That's €2.4 million given away so far this year. We're looking to brighten up summer for more people. Taking part is easy. Every day we give you the amount, you take note of it, you enter, and if it's you that we call at 3 o'clock on Monday, you tell us the amount and you win that cash. This summer cash machine has been reloaded, and it's €10,748.18. To enter, text OTB and only OTB to 57557. If it's you that we call back after 3 o'clock on Monday the 12th, then answer your phone within 5 rings and tell us the prize amount, and you will win the money. Text OTB to 57557. The cost is $2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You've got to be over 18. You're playing across the Go Loud network of stations. The terms and conditions are on offtheball.com. Make sure you get your entry in by 3 o'clock on Monday. That's 3 o'clock today. The cash machine will then randomly pick one entry. It could be you we're calling. Answer within 5 rings. Tell us the prize amount, and the cash is yours. The number again, €10,748.18. Text OTB to 57557. Back after these.
Off the Ball's Cash Machine.
It was like if we had to be live, it would have been like local radio, Jonathan. But no, it was fabulous, because even take away the drama at the very end, like as you said, there was short ball, the modern game, playing around and up to the middle of the field to get it in. Then most of the time, then it was get the ball in and let's win it, because it was mainly both teams mainly had kind of one-on-one inside. Galway definitely played with one in the full forward line, and which led to, it was high risk, I suppose, for Kilkenny. And we seen it at the end. Kevin Cooney was all on his own, very, very difficult to defend, and Tommy Welch did very well to keep him out, but Kevin got 1 or 2 scores. And I suppose if you're looking back on the moments of the game, the goals were key. Starting with Mossy's goal straight away, would he be playing, would he not? Came on, scored a goal straight away at the start. Mikey Butler scored a fantastic goal.
Can we just stop about that? Quarterbacks shouldn't finish like that. We were right behind it. It was a rocket of a shot.
And most of the time you're giving out with the cornerbacks. What are they doing up there? Get back and do a bit of defending, what you're supposed to be doing. But when they go up and score goals like that, not more can be said really.
OTB AM,
the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Off the Ball Daily. A home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball.
We all need a little bit of extra skincare after being out in the sun. It's much easier to be a reasonable parent when it's sunny. Like, I don't care what anybody says, but if we lived in Australia, I'd be super dad.
Subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed right now. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, 4 minutes past 8. We're turning to the hurling at the weekend. I'm delighted to say Sarah O'Donovan is with us. Sarah, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good. I don't mean to upset anyone now this morning, lads, but we have only 5 weeks and 6 days left of this hurling championship. And 12th of June, 23rd of July.
Yeah. And so, how do you actually feel about that?
I'm getting withdrawal already. Like this microwave championship. Like when I actually said, oh my God, there's literally 6 weeks left, and then it's done until February. So you got to soak up every single minute of hurling between now and the end of July.
It feels like maybe we could do with a few more games, given there's been an avalanche of football over the last couple of weeks. Everybody's complained about too much football, but maybe there's an in-between where we get more of these games.
Yeah, look, the likes of Wexford, Cork, I suppose the shortened season for those teams, there's a window here that could be looked at next year in terms of the format. But right now, those games yesterday, they didn't disappoint. Like, where do you start with Limerick and Clare? I suppose we talked when Limerick were overturned by Clare about the tackles, hooks, blocks count, right? Clare had won it 112 blocks to 102, and Limerick yesterday reversed the stats. 121 hooks, tackles, blocks to Clare's 109. Those stats were provided by Ray Boyne. He is on the money with this. The attitude of Limerick yesterday was pitch perfect. And yet, right, we were talking about this earlier, Limerick don't feel as invincible as they have done in recent seasons. So while, look, the 5 in a row is such a big thing for them because it's history. And again, Christy O'Connor's talking about the great statisticians pointing out that there's now 3 of the Limerick lads who have 6 Munster titles, and they're on their own at a level with that. I'm just going to get this exactly right. It's Hannon, Nicky Quaid and Graham Mulcahy, the first Limerick hurlers to win 6 Munster titles. And he's now the joint most successful Munster captain of all time alongside Johnny Lahey from Tipperary. So this is a history-making team. And I was listening to Tommy the last night, and he'd make the hair stand in the back of your neck about the history involved, and I had forgotten all of those stats that he was chatting about last week. But I think you were talking about Alex Ferguson a while ago. The levels of ruthlessness that John Kiely has brought into this setup and the organisation to get that group of players to 5 in a row. It's something that we really have to, I suppose, look back at the end of the season and say, how has he organised it, that he's finding the form player at the exact right moment to do the exact right thing for Limerick, which is ultimately what Clare couldn't do yesterday.
And we were a little bit concerned about the impact that Limerick were getting off the bench up to this point. It almost felt like we'd been talking about their strength and depth, but it hadn't quite delivered for them. And then, lo and behold, it's the younger players who do deliver down the stretch.
Adam English, Cathal O'Neill, Tom Morrissey was taken off yesterday. He was shaking his head. He was frustrated coming off yesterday because I think he was like, I'm not ready to come off here. Peter Duggan was the same on the Clare side, shaking his head going, this game isn't over for me. But John Kiely said, no, Cathal O'Neill's going in now. Cathal O'Neill delivers, David Reedy delivers. The ball that David Reedy was giving Aaron Gillan, Aaron Gillan is obviously the superstar yesterday, but those players, Adam English, David Reedy, Cathal O'Neill, to deliver late in the game, that's the beauty or the excellence, the mystery of Paul Kinnerk and John Kiely. How are they doing this?
When you hear later on, Sarah, that Conor Cleary's going to be injured with that shoulder injury, obviously not enough time to recover, a bit of a surprise that Cian Nolan was maybe detailed with having to mark Aaron Gillan, and it just didn't go to plan for Clare whatsoever. Gillan was outrageous. Maybe, as I was saying this morning, did Brian Lohan take too long to take Cian Nolan off Gillan? Like, were there in-game decision making that Clare got wrong?
Yeah, I think I spoke about the Cork-Clare game a couple of weeks ago, and I thought that the masterstroke was bringing Shane O'Morey in when he did for Clare, and that was the difference between Clare and Cork. So I was surprised that he held him for so long. I think when you have a player of Aaron Gillan's
talent, and you're asking somebody to mark him, which is what they were asking Cian Nolan to do yesterday. I think if he had been tasked with 30 minutes and Shane O'Morey was coming in for the second 30 minutes, and you have to be cynical here when you're playing a player of Aaron Gillan's quality. So you say you can afford 3-4 fouls here, Cian. At that point, at that juncture, when you've hit your max, we'll put Shane O'Morey in. He'll get 3-4 fouls before the referee has to make a decision. You're talking about possibly 8 different times in the game where they can disrupt and stop Aaron Gillan from scoring between them, and that's where the naivety was there yesterday. Nolan would have worked to a point, and then it was Shane O'Morey coming in and doing the exact same job to disrupt Gillan, and he left him on too long.
Like we can talk about the positives of Limerick, but also like Clare, as we said this morning, like it might have left it behind them. You look at, I think it was 13 wide, 6 shots dropped short, so it was there for Clare.
It was that period before half time when Clare were on top, and Ryan Taylor's heading for goal. That's when you keep the scoreboard ticking over. That's when you tap on your scores. They'd have gone 6 clear. That would have been very comfortable, and it would have also settled them, because in the second half you'd uncharacteristic errors from Tony Kelly. You'd poor decision making. The likes of Diarmuid Ryan catches a massive ball in the first half, and instead of settling, he drives the ball wide. That gives the impetus to Limerick. That allows them to set up a counter-attack. And I think when Clare look back on this game, it wasn't the late free that should have been awarded that lost them the game. It's all of the little mistakes in those 40-50 minutes where they were at Limerick, but they just couldn't get over the line.
Can I just go back to Limerick for a second, right? In terms of the rest of the season, and again, I was making the point about the history really to go that this is actually something from them and their perspective that is done now. There's 2 more games left for Limerick in a different competition for them to refocus, and there's time for them to deal with the injury issues that they had, and that's the big benefit. And there's obviously also time for them to come down off that massive high from yesterday. But the one thing that they will be thinking is that, okay, everybody's just getting a little bit closer. This is all getting very uncomfortable. Single point victories in games against sides who in recent seasons they've been able to just touch off and hold off at arm's length, and I suspect they will be a little bit concerned. The brains trust in Limerick and the analysts will be now thinking, okay, everybody's having a go off them and everybody's coming up with slightly different ways to cause them difficulties. And they're still great champions. That's like, obviously they're still great champions, but will everybody else be waking up this morning going, okay, all right, yeah, well done, congratulations, enjoy your celebrations there, lads, but we're coming for you?
I don't think so. I think yesterday the team hit the form that will actually get them over the line. Come the 23rd of July, I can't see them being beaten now. That stat, that 121 tackles, hooks, blocks, that work rate that they managed to find to beat Clare yesterday, that's only going to make them more confident. And Dennis Walsh spoke about them after the Cork match, sitting under the Mackey stand as a group, unified, 31 players. I had spoken a couple of weeks ago about them missing their opportunity, that legacy moment, because I genuinely couldn't see Tip doing what they did to Waterford. They were afforded a window to do this, to have this legacy moment, but it's only going to make them more confident.
The decisions at the end, Sarah, we have to talk about them. So Tony Kelly and then Adam Hogan, both looked to be clearly fouled. Certainly the Tony Kelly one from the challenge from Peter Casey was very, very heavy, you'd have to say. We actually have a clip here, I think, of Brian Lowen. So he was asked about it after the match. So here's his view. Before we ask your view, here's what Brian Lowen had to say about it afterwards.
You played the last 30 seconds and maybe unlucky not to get a free.
Yeah, we find it very hard to get those kind of frees. So that's disappointing.
Is it frustrating? Obviously, a lot goes in. It comes down to fine margins always, especially in these type of games. That not getting those decisions.
Yeah, sure. Look, what can you say? It's frustrating. Would have loved to have got a free, but we didn't.
You went in at half time, a goal up at that point, played really well in that first half. You're probably thinking at that point that you were happy enough where you're at.
Yeah, we were happy enough at half time. We probably could have gone in a little bit more ahead. Just before half time we were doing well, and probably left a couple of scores behind us. So that's really the story of the game. Really, we just left scores behind us.
Yeah, a few wides and just some balls dropping short, and that's probably in the end what caused it?
Yeah, I think that our stats lads were telling us now that our shooting efficiency was only around 50% and theirs was approximately 70. So, that's tough.
When you're playing the reigning All-Ireland champions, 5 in a row now, Munster champions, the best in the game, it's unbelievable to be up there and a point behind, and obviously have bet them up to now as well.
Yeah, well, look, that's the nature of it. Like, that's the standard that you want to get to, sure, that's it. Yeah.
How do you regroup now after this?
Sure, we just go back and try and get our work done and prepare for the next day, whoever that's going to be. So we have 2 weeks to prepare, and that's what we'll do.
Yeah, he's heartbroken.
He is. The thing that I would disagree with there is the first comment where he said we struggle to get those breaks. I think they got a couple of them against Cork. I think Tim O'Mahony will feel aggrieved about a one up in the corner against Cork in that game that they won by a point. There's no question that was a free. It should have been a free. But if you're relying on that to get you, over the line, you can't be relying on the referee. You can't be looking for scores. It was the 12 shots dropped short, or 12 shots wide. It was the 6 shots dropped short. That's where the game was lost. So, and in fairness, Andy Spark there, yeah.
Well, in fairness, he did talk about the efficiency. That was the first thing he went for when he was asked about that. Look, when you're post-match and you're Brian Lohan, you are absolutely making sure that you're in the mind of the referee the next time a call is happening, that you're going to get it, and that's what all managers would do. But just going back to last year, Clare and Limerick drew in Ennis in the round robin. They drew in the Munster final and goes to extra time, and Limerick win by, was it a point or two in the end? They beat them this year in the Gaelic rounds in the round robin, and then they lose by a point at the end of the game. Like, they're right there with the greatest hurling team, the second greatest hurling team of all time, who are on the verge of becoming the greatest hurling team of all time. I can see why you'd be heartbroken, but at the same time, it's right there for you. Come on, recover.
Exactly, and I think yesterday actually my brother was saying to me, he says, Sarah, I don't think that if Clare won yesterday that they'd beat them. They can't beat them 3 times in a year. He said, so maybe this is the best thing that happened to Clare. They've lost this, but they have a chance to go at them in the All-Ireland series. And maybe he's right. Maybe you can't beat a team 3 times in 1 year, or certainly Limerick. So maybe Clare are saving the best for last, but they have to improve in terms of their distribution. The Cork game, they had so much time and space to deliver the ball to the likes of Shane O'Donnell, the likes of Tony Kelly. And yesterday, Peter Duggan, Shane O'Donnell must have been so frustrated because you couldn't tell when the ball was going to be delivered. And that was the difference between Clare and Limerick yesterday. Every time the diagonal ball came into Gillane, it was a gift. And that's the kind of distribution that you're talking about when you need to win big games like this. Clare have to get that right. They have the forwards. They just didn't have the delivery yesterday.
Sometimes the difference can be small things, Sarah. I find certainly on this show we sometimes don't give credit to the goalkeepers. Nicky Quaid probably deserves a little bit of a mention. Turns 34 today, by the way. Some vital saves, that save from Rodgers in the first half in particular, but maybe sometimes they deserve a little more credit. And Nicky Quaid is such a vital cog of this Limerick machine.
Yeah, I think it was that big score from Darragh O'Donovan. It was the turnover, and then he gives a razor pass to O'Donovan, and O'Donovan points it from the sideline. I think if I'm correct, that was a literally 15-second passage that Quaid saw him into the hand, over the bar. It's not just his saves; it's that switched on, looking for those non-safe passes. He was incredible again yesterday. Owen Murphy the same for Kilkenny, but you need somebody with that razor sharp composure, and that's Quaid. Happy birthday, Nicky.
Let's go to the Leinster final. It's very, very hard to know what to make of this either, right? Let's start with Galway. Again, so close to winning and so involved in the last minute where they will definitely rue every section of that passage of play, where 4 or 5 players, in fairness, had the opportunity to prevent the winning score for Kilkenny. So how do you recover from this?
You don't.
You have some experience of this.
You don't. Haunted 7 years later, Parnell Park, Leinster Club final, playing Thomastown of Kilkenny, up by a point, last 30 seconds of the game, our keeper bats the ball down. They react quickest to it. It's in the back of the net, and it is over. There is no time to recover, and still haunts me 7 years later. I think Park Mannion, it'll be played on a reel. It was a really unfortunate, obviously decision to make, to try and boot the ball, and he puts it into the path of Cillian Buckley. Now, Buckley had so much work to do to get to where he got to put the ball at the back of the net, but again, it was that crazy attitude and work rate from Kilkenny that had them up in the corner, stuck into Galway, not letting them out. They had no right to get that goal, and they got it. The devastation on Henry Shefflin's face after the match just summed it up.
I know he said he didn't know what to say to them afterwards, but we were making the point earlier. Well, this is where you find out how good you are as a manager, because that Galway team are right there in contention to win the All-Ireland series. And again, this competition is over. Leinster, you've got to absolutely get over it. And yeah, so there is a pathway for them to get back to a very difficult pathway to get back to an All-Ireland final, and to win the competition they're going to have to produce massive performances, but they're really, it turns out, very clearly capable of it.
I still think though that it's probably to their detriment that Tipperary were so bad against Waterford, because Tipperary have been licking the wounds in the background now for the last 3 weeks. They're going to be coming into this game against Galway with a massive point to prove, and they will be able to chip away at Galway. And I think it's the wrong game for Henry and Galway to get at this juncture after the way they've lost that game.
It's consistency, isn't it, Sarah? That's a word that Liam Sheedy certainly used last night. It's just Galway, it's so hot and cold. You don't know what to expect of them, even within a game. They can have 2 quarters that are brilliant, separated, and then 2 quarters that are terrible. So how do you fix something like that?
They went 6-1 up, then they were 8 points down, then they went 2 points clear. I think, though, if you're looking at the goals they conceded, the Mikey Butler goal, stunning goal, but he wasn't tracked. They switched off. He wasn't tracked. He punishes them. Walter Walsh, he's coming off the bench. Kilkenny scored 2-4 yesterday from their bench. Your plan A is your first 15, and Derek Ling had to manage yesterday with the injuries to Martin Keown early, the players that he brought in. To get 2-4 from your bench, your plan B is brilliant from Kilkenny, but there's a massive naivety there on Galway's part, to allow Walter Walsh to run 40 yards and not be tagged. At some point somebody had to step in, and they didn't do it yesterday. So defensively, Henry has a lot of work to do at Galway.
I know for Galway fans and the coaching team as well, it'd be tough to take positives from a result like that, but Conor Whelan's performance certainly has to be one of them.
Yeah, I think Jackie Tyrrell suggests he was a one-trick pony, and he's not, and it is down to the supply. We spoke during the league, you'll remember second league game, I was incredibly frustrated with them in that they weren't able to deliver ball. They didn't have a route to goal, and in fairness to Whelan, he was picking up breaks yesterday. It was kind of an old-fashioned style of game. There was a lot of loose ball, there was a lot of high batting, there was ball breaking, and he was on the breaks. Jason Flynn's goal was a stunning goal. There was positives, but they haven't fixed that problem either. There's a route to goal, and they haven't found, I suppose, the most efficient route to goal, and the most efficient way is the Arngillan way, lads, and other teams haven't managed to find that way yet, or certainly haven't been able to impose that kind of style of hurling on their play yet.
The difference between winning and losing, obviously, is you get the weeks off, and you get a slightly handier route because you're facing teams who are coming back from defeat. And we do expect that it will be Clare against Kilkenny in All-Ireland semi-final again, more than likely. For Kilkenny's perspective, would they be happy, or would they feel like, actually, what?
I think from Clare's point of view, you'd have to say that those players that Clare have kind of managed to, I suppose, hold on to this year in the panel, the likes of Ryan Taylor, who didn't go that well yesterday, the likes of Mark Rogers, Aidan McCarthy didn't go well yesterday, but he will have better days. The quality is there. I think they'll be more excited about playing Kilkenny than Kilkenny will be playing Clare, because I think that the pressure would be on Kilkenny more so than Clare. Kilkenny delivered last year, Clare did not. To have to beat a team that you've already beaten, I think, is a harder thing to do.
Although you do know that you're capable of just crushing them, and their spirit and their soul, and squeeze, you're gone. We did it last year to you lads. We don't even think about you.
The difference is, though, you'll see I know we talked about the 2-4 off the bench from Kilkenny, but you're looking at the likes of Adrian Mullen, the likes of Richie Reid. There's that quality would have to come back into the Kilkenny panel to be able to get over the line against Clares and Limericks. I think I just feel that there's a little inexperience there in the Kilkenny setup that when they meet the Munster teams, they're going to need.
It's funny how the list of scorers when you look at a team can be deceiving sometimes, because Owen Cody only scored 3 points, and I say only because it's from a total of 421, but every time he gets the ball, Sarah, you feel like he's threatening and he's trying to create something positive. A brilliant performance.
I love Cody. I think the lads on the hurling pod were chatting, and I had asked them who would John Kiley put in his team, and they reckoned Cody and Desi Hutchinson into the forwards line alongside Aaron Gillan because of what they offer around the square and how clinical they are around goal. And he did the same again yesterday. Look, his decision making is pitch perfect.
He's the actual the kick away for the goal at the end. Like, there's nothing in that moment a player can do differently, is there? Like, Mannion probably is just thinking. Do
you genuinely not? Like, there was ample opportunity to put that ball out over the sideline.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah,
he could have actually stood on the ball and fouled the ball, and they would have had a free. And they could have only got a point out of a free. Mannion could have actually fouled the ball there.
Even when the ball's in the corner and there's that frantic, whatever it was, 30-40 seconds of just nobody being able to gather the ball.
I'd have fallen on the ball. I'd have laid on the ball. I'd have probably picked the ball off the ground, because what you were giving them was an opportunity to only get one score, and they needed two.
Put it out for 65 possibly.
Anything. Fall on the ball. Literally.
I mean... There is 4 Galway lads in between Buckley and the goal, so it did still require everybody else. I understand that one player kicks him the ball, but he's so far out, and there is still plenty of room. Like,
it's the Harry Ruddle goal. It's the Ballygunner. It's the Ballygunner goal. It will haunt Galway for the rest of their years, genuinely. But it was. I think it was meant to be, wasn't it? It was the satisfaction Brian Cody had in the stand afterwards, the big smiley head. It was, look, Kilkenny deserved that. They deserved that win for the attitude that they showed and actually driving into Galway when the game was over. And you wish other teams had that same character, that same attitude. I just think that for Galway now, with Tip coming at them, they're hitting a point here, lads, where they're going to find it very hard to beat that Tip team.
Okay, let's just for a moment have a hypothetical situation where they do manage to get over Tipperary. Does that then give them the confidence to go on and say we can perform in Croke Park? We know that we are good enough. We also have managed to unlock the biggest tactical conundrum we had in Conor Whelan, and so that's the type of thing that should give them confidence.
I don't think Galway are All-Ireland champions based on the myriad of games we've seen in the last 6 or 7 weeks. They're not the full package, and it will be a big ask for Henry to get them to an All-Ireland final, to win an All-Ireland final with the quality that's outside of the team.
Okay, you did say you think that it's going to be hard for anybody to beat Limerick at this point, that they're going to get more confidence. How close are Kilkenny to them?
Based on the league final and Páirc Uí Chaoimh, obviously the league and championship performances are pulled apart, but I genuinely think that Limerick are 3 to 4 points better than Kilkenny right now. 3 to 4 points, no question.
And say Kilkenny reach an All-Ireland final and Adrian Mullen's thumb miraculously heals in the meantime. Is that enough to get it back to a 1 point or 2 point game? Because let's face it, like, Limerick aren't blowing anybody away at this stage.
They're not, but the quality that they were able to bring into the setup yesterday, to be able to bring in Adam English, to be able to bring Cathal O'Neill, David Reedy to give the performance that he gave, and there's still that ticking over where Garrod Hegarty, Morrissey, Seamus Flanagan, there's still so much hurling left in that group outside of those new players. It's only going to get better from Limerick from here. That's all I can see is Limerick to the end.
Was there any weaknesses from Limerick that you saw at the weekend?
I think that without Sean Finn, and I suppose with that, like Mark Rogers, that pace that the ball comes off the post, he turns down Morrissey, balls in the back of the net, the overlap, they were able to create Clare in terms of their pace, and they were able to go at Limerick. Hannon at 6, obviously had to come off injured. Defensively, I would say that they're looking tired. They're that group, that six, that's coming to the end. There's more forward opportunities there than there is defensive opportunities for Limerick. So I would say pacier teams, more clinical, more accurate teams will be able to cause Limerick hassle. But their forward play from Limerick is just exceptional right now.
All right, Sarah, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks, lads.
Sarah, do you want to give us thoughts on the two big games yesterday? Here's some John Kiley talking about Aaron Gillan and Adam English.
And it was a brilliant team performance, but I suppose Aaron Gillan, 111 out there today, just immense.
Yeah, I'm thrilled for Aaron. Aaron is just a special player, and when you're taking those frees and when you're that inside man alongside Seamus, the energy that they have to expound just to get free, to hit the spaces, timing their runs, repeating their runs, recycling their runs, and when the ball comes in, then trying to retain the ball under the toughest of pressure. You'd have to say they did brilliantly inside there today, and Aaron, I think in the second half really did put his stamp on the game. He was absolutely exceptional. So thrilled for Aaron. He's a great guy, and I think he's getting better with every game as well, which is great to see.
Declan Hannon, when he lifted the cup, he said, "I hope that the supporters are enjoying the journey as much as all of you are." It really is some journey that this Limerick team are on.
It is, yeah. It's a great one, and I can tell you, we have a lot of young players on the panel at the moment as well. And I only said to them on Friday night, I'm very excited by the way they're playing at the moment. I'm excited about the energy they have. I'm excited about the skill set they have, and I'm excited about the mentality that they have. And they're waiting in the wings for one of these guys to slip up, because they will, like Adam English today. His uncle unfortunately passed away yesterday morning, and he comes along and does what he did today for the team. Tremendous character, and for a young player to come and do that in the most difficult of circumstances. That was the most difficult game I think subs have ever gone on for us in the last 6 years, and for them to go in and do what they did, Cathal O'Neill himself, all the lads that came on, I'm just so proud of them.
Yeah, John Kiley speaking with Aisling O'Reilly after Limerick's victory yesterday. It's bang on 8:30 this morning. A reminder, OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. We're turning our attention back to the Champions League final. Delighted to say Martin Lipton is with us. Martin, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
The response to Manchester City's treble is very different from my memory of the response to Manchester United's treble, and maybe it's because the manner of the final in Barcelona was so spectacular, but it's almost like this was expected, and so people kind of had a lot of their thoughts pre-formed, and it does feel as if the asterisk of the charges that Manchester City are facing is much more foregrounded in the response to and the analysis of the game than maybe would have been the case previously. What's your instinct about that? Why is that the case, or am I right about that?
Well, I think it depends who you support as well. If you're a Manchester City fan, you think that's a complete nonsense. You just want to celebrate the triumph. Rival fans and others will always point to it. It is a fact, whether we like it or not, whether City like it or not, more pertinently, that they still face 115 charges from the Premier League. It's also a fact, I think, that we're unlikely to see any end of that process for 3 years. So people are going to have to get used to it. But you're right. I think there is a degree of scepticism over the manner in which City have gone about their business off the field. At the same time, on the field, everyone recognises how fantastic they are as a team. I mean, that was probably one of their worst performances of the season on Saturday night, but they still won. And as I said last time I was on the show, or certainly recently, they won the treble the day they beat Real Madrid, because that was their last test, and they passed it with flying colours. And in fact, they haven't really played very well since they beat Real Madrid. But over the season, they've been outstanding. At the same time, without question, fingers are and will continue to be pointed.
In a weird way, and maybe it's not that weird, but as the success becomes more embedded, the conversation ratchets up in terms of the level of attention and scrutiny that the charges are going to bring. And I do wonder sometimes if maybe there's an impact when... So I was trying to think of this in the context of the European Super League, and how, if City had really had their way, ultimately 5 or 6 years ago there would have been a European Super League. But now the European champions are like, well, hang on, we're not going to. We've got to keep the importance of the European Cup. It's such an important, historic, valuable thing, and we end up talking about this instead of the football.
It's quite funny. I mean, what I would say is that City were not one of the guiding forces of Super League. They were, when that came about two or so years ago. They were very much late adopters. Both them and Chelsea were the last two to come in, and also the first two to get out. At that point, of course, they were using the threat earlier than that as part of their legal case against UEFA, because they just deploy the heavy artillery. I mean, you do fear that City would get a QC on, or KC as it is now, on you if you had a minor dispute about branding with the club. I mean, they don't mess around. They go with the heavy artillery. Since the Super League debacle and since the resolution of the case, what's really interesting is the bridges that have been built between UEFA and Manchester City. You wouldn't know that from the fans who are still turning their back on the anthem and booing it and all this sort of nonsense. At the highest level of the club, they're more embedded in line with UEFA and the ECA, the European Club Association, now than they have ever been.
Were you surprised by the nature of the performance itself, Martin? Given, I guess, given the pressure that's on the game, you can understand it. But I mean, the setup from City and I guess the chances that Inter were allowed, was that surprising?
I think the surprise to me was to see Manchester City looking like a nervous football team, which we haven't done for a very long time. The weight of the previous failure, particularly the final against Chelsea, the pressure of expectation, the knowledge that if they lost, it would be they'd thrown it away and they'd be to blame. And that was quite interesting, because it definitely had an adverse impact on them. And the fear for everybody else is that the next time they play in a final, which could well be this time next year at Wembley, they'll have none of that and they'll just go out and splosh the opposition. But I also want to say, Inter played. I think there's a bit, we may have known what Inter were going to do, but they did it extremely well. And the first chance to hit the bar was a bit of a freak, but I mean, it was just pressure. The Lukaku chance, he will, I'm sure, have nightmares about missing that, because, to use the phrase, and I know that in an XG world it doesn't exist, but nevertheless, to use the phrase, he couldn't miss, and he did.
So you're putting it down, as someone in the comments quite harshly, I thought, this morning said to us, is Lukaku the worst centre forward to ever play in a Champions League final? But I mean, like Chris Sutton said, it was a horrendous miss, but then others were given a little bit of credit to Onana in goals. Where do you stand? Horrendous?
It just hit Ederson. He had no idea. And it hit him so quickly that it came back and hit Ruben Dias and nearly went in as an own goal. I mean, it was one of those where anywhere else he scores, all he has to do, he's got the whole goal to aim at, and he missed it. And it's a real disappointment. You do feel that if Djokovic's still been on the pitch, it probably would have gone in. What I would say is, actually, when Lukaku came on, he caused them more threat than anyone else had in the entire match. To be honest, I thought he actually, apart from his finishing being shocking, he made all the runs he needed to make. And it was a shame for Inter, because I think while City have been the dominant team, the dominant team in European football this season and beyond that, and they've finally proven it, Inter deserved extra time on Saturday night.
And their fans were incredible. Really, the atmosphere pre-game, and the stadium is so big and the pitch is so far away, it's difficult for anybody to create that. But the Inter fans were really there, and the team seemed to feed off that, and they grew into the game, and they went about their task in a way that I thought was interesting. So a lot of the papers are talking about some of the players saying we're going to go on now and build a dynasty, and that's what players do in the aftermath of something like this. But it does feel as if teams are able to thwart City in a way more often. The games are closer, it feels a little bit now, as the big brains in European football start to go about trying to tackle Manchester City.
Yeah, but they have to find a way. And you look at that game on Saturday, and yes, Inter did really, really well, but Manchester City's best player went on the pitch not fit and lasted half an hour. So a fully fit Kevin De Bruyne changes the game. Let's hope for him that this hamstring injury, tear or rupture, whatever it might be, he can be fixed. He comes back really, really strong next season. They will also, because they can, get some more players in to have more options. City have moved and evolved each season under Guardiola. So they'll move and evolve again. The difference being now that they move and evolve from a position of strength. They've achieved everything. So the question now is, do those players have the motivation to start the climb again, having already climbed the biggest peak once? Well, the manager will make sure they do. And anyone who doesn't live up to his expectations will not be at the club. I mean, that's what happened. Look at, if you're Cancelo, who forced your way out of the club to go and play for Bayern Munich was part, but only a bit part of a team that just about hung on for another dull, boring, inevitable Bundesliga crown. Did you really make the right move in January? I mean, it's a cautionary warning there. For all that Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus were fantastic parts of Arsenal's season, had they stayed at City, they'd now be treble winners rather than we came second winners. There's a bit of that in the players' mentality will be key. But yes, the best coaches will look at City and think, right, well, Rudiger managed to neutralise Hurling. Serbi did to a good extent actually, on Saturday. If you can be physical and aggressive against Hurling and neutralise him, that takes a lot of their threat out of the way. Then can we hurt them? Well, possibly we can. Do we actually see what's been a massive strength of City this season, which is John Stones coming into midfield, as something you can actually exploit, find a way to take advantage of that? All of these things, this is what the elite coaches do. And in the Premier League and in Europe, they will be studying the videos and trying to work out a way. And one or two of them, I'm sure, will find a way in the odd game. The question is, can others deliver the way of stopping them game after game after game? And that's very difficult because of the relentlessness of the way they play. But a lot of what have been great about City this season has been Gundogan and Bernardo Silva. Now, neither of them may be at the club next season. Everything changes, constant evolution.
Yeah, that's why I'm not penciling them in for a dynasty. A lot does depend on who actually fetches up next season. Plus, maybe we haven't quite seen the development of somebody like Phil Foden into the player that we know he can be or could be. So maybe that's a reason to say, okay, that's a plus as opposed to a negative, that actually there's still plenty of room for growth for Foden to become a more dominant player.
Well, I thought that Foden did really well when he came on, particularly in the second half. He was making those runs in behind, wasn't he? 3 or 4 times he gets in there. He's not had a great season. That's pretty clear. I think he may have picked up an injury at the World Cup. He certainly hasn't been as influential since he came back from Qatar. He didn't really do what England were looking him to do in Qatar. But he's still a very young boy, and as you know, players' development isn't necessarily a consistent arc. It can be up and down, and you have a good season, a bad season, you come again. I don't think he'll feel devastated by the season. He will feel, I could have done better, but then he'll look at the medals around his chest and think, well, this is all right, I can do better. Would you have said this time last year that Jack Grealish would become a starting, absolute stick-on starter in the first 11? No. In fact, this time last year, you were wondering if they made an almighty mess on Grealish and might look to bin him in the summer. Things can change very quickly.
Martin, in your learned football opinion, who is the better football manager, Alex Ferguson or Pep Guardiola?
Ferguson stands the test of time. Ferguson achieved at 2 very different clubs. But Ferguson didn't reinvent football. And when you see what Guardiola has done and continues to do, his legacy may last for longer. I think it will. Ferguson's must never be forgotten, and interesting that one of the first people Guardiola was talking about was Ferguson, and not in a negative, I've done better than him, as in he's someone I respect hugely, and they do respect each other hugely. But Guardiola's ability to transform teams, to transform players, and also to win under pressure of expectations, I think you've got to give him the edge on it, yeah.
And there is the point as well, what happens after the treble, and the point was made in the Guardian as well, that there were missteps and mistakes made by Ferguson and United in the year or two after the treble year. So that's something that Guardiola will of course look to. It gives him the motivation to I guess achieve the next thing.
Well, look, I've always felt that he wanted to win the league in all 5 major countries, and he's done 3. So at some point, he's going to want to leave to go and win the title in Italy, probably with Juventus or Inter, and in France, which therefore means PSG, just so he can be the first to win the title in all 5 countries. He didn't win the Champions League with Bayern, and that was seen as a black mark against him. So he'll know that he needs to evolve. I just wonder how long he'll want to stay at City because of that thirst for something new and fresh. I mean, he'll never be satisfied. He wouldn't be satisfied if the opposition never touched the ball in a game, even though they have to touch it at least once for kickoff. But he would. He wants 100% possession, which isn't possible, and is always trying to actually achieve the impossible. That's his dream. So there may come a point when he just wants something different, but he will not allow himself to settle on his laurels at City. It's just not in his nature.
As the season went on, he seemed to trust the squad depth less and less, that he settled on his first team and very un-Pep-like, didn't make changes, didn't overthink it, was like, okay, I know exactly what my team is going to be. The shape changed a little bit, but not much, and the essentially back 4 of centre-backs, with obviously Stones playing in midfield as an auxiliary midfielder. He settled on that kind of post-World Cup and then didn't really change. Players like Riyad Mahrez, who've been so important over the last few seasons, didn't really seem to get a look in when push came to shove in the big games. Does this suggest that maybe the City strength and depth thing isn't, in Pep's mind, and that's the important part of this, in Pep's mind, as clear as it would be to us mere mortals outside?
Well, I think the argument would be he does what he does in the first half of the season so he can do what he wants to do in the second half of the season. And therefore, it will be the same next year, and you wouldn't be shocked to see City being 6 or 7 points off the lead at Christmas and winning their group quite comfortably because he rotates more at the start. And then when it comes to the crunch, he goes back to what he knows works, albeit, you wouldn't have seen John Stones in central midfield at any point before it happened. And I think perhaps he learns from his own errors. That Champions League final against Chelsea, when he completely messed it up, no question, he remembered that and was determined not to make those mistakes again. I think it helps if you know you've got the best squad of players, which he has. Even more so when you know you've got a centre forward who'll score you 35 goals, even if he touches the ball 36 times in the entire season. That is obviously a slight over or exaggeration.
Not much though. We get it. Yeah.
So I think what you will see is a similar pattern, that he'll be much more willing to try things and to trust a bigger coterie of players in the opening half of the campaign, and then let's see where we are in February, March when it starts to matter.
John Stones, Martin, deserves a particular conversation because he's just been remarkable. The Times, I think, described him as the Barnsley Busquets. He's just become a remarkable part of this City machine, and just every single big game seemed to put in a big performance.
Yeah, he's been absolutely outstanding. Look, we've always known that there was a player there. And at times he's had difficult times. He's not always been smooth at all. Been out of the team at City, struggling in. Many times you'd have thought in recent seasons, well, he's actually 3rd or 4th choice centre half at the club. And now he's found this position, or been developed into a position which only a genius would have seen, and that's Guardiola. Because let's be honest, there is not another manager in the world who'd have looked at John Stones and said, yeah, he's going to be my supreme player in central midfield. Now, it isn't conceivable, and yet that's what's happened, and he's been fabulous. And confidence on the ball is remarkable. The sense of purpose when he gets delivery, the trust that the other players have in him, is a testament to what he does. In a team of superstars, they want him to have the ball. Now, that's not a bad thing for a converted centre half, is it?
His dribbling ability the other night was something that I hadn't quite realised was as high end as it was against Inter. I don't know, maybe it was the occasion and it was the adrenaline, but if he can add that to his game, it's quite remarkable.
Well, we've been seeing signs of it over the last few months, haven't we? That there's something special there, and he seems to have a calmness and clarity in possession Maybe that comes from all those years of playing as a centre half and often having time to make the ball forward. It's just, it's developed within him a sense of certainty and poise. And if you can keep that clarity of thought amidst the maelstrom of midfield, then you've already got 2 yards of advantage over your opponent.
Ruben Dias as well, like his performance stepped up a notch again, and probably the best player after Stones.
Yeah, I would say he was excellent. Yes, I mean he had to be because he was under a bit of pressure. It's indicative of that. They didn't play great as a team, and yet the goalkeeper was as nervous as anyone. I think that actually added to their sense of anxiety. The first 20 minutes, every time Ederson got the ball, every City fan had palpitations, and yet he's normally one of the calmer players. But you're right, Dias was once again excellent, and he has been all season. Has become a critical part of that side. I didn't think Grealish had a bad game, but he's been really damning of himself. I think obviously De Bruyne wasn't as good as he might be because of the injuries. Hurling has been more effective out of the games. You could go through lots of them, but the key thing is they found a way to win. Again, even without playing well. And so many times, one defeat in the last 28, and that was in a game that didn't matter at Brentford when the title was already been presented. They found the ability to do what they had to do when it mattered most, and that's a priceless asset for any team.
You were rightly complimentary of Inter's performance earlier, Martin. Was this a flash in the pan European season for them, or can they push on next season? Because I guess they even have a gap domestically on Napoli to close.
I think that they put a lot of investment in doing well in Europe. They hadn't done for quite some time. And they were in another tough group, and they've had a really series of really difficult draws over the last few years. Remember the season that they were in the group of Spurs and Barcelona, and that's how. And every season it seems they get a tough one. And this time they just about they got through, and then suddenly they found a bit of belief. But they've also got to deal with one would assume a different sort of Juventus. Napoli were excellent, but of course Napoli have lost their manager, so we don't know what they'll be like next season. They may sell players because De Laurentiis might feel the need to cash in, and other teams, Milan as well. Lazio had a good season. Lazio in the Champions League next season. It actually looks like it might be quite a competitive league. They will want to go deep again. They've lost that sense of fear that they had in Europe. They had a bit of a negativity factor when they played in the Champions League over a number of seasons, ever since the Benitez team that struggled in defending the title in 2010-11, and so therefore that has now dissipated. But it's so tough. You could pick 10 teams now who all of whom would expect to be in the last 8, and that's not possible. Would Inter be in that 10? Not necessarily sure. They certainly think they should be in the last 16. They wouldn't say they should be in the last 8, but there are quite a lot of others who will. There's 2 in Spain, there's 1 in France, there's 1 in Germany. There'll be 2 or 3 in England plus others.
Martin, good stuff. We'll leave it there. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, bye-bye.
It's Martin Lipton giving us his thoughts on the Champions League final. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or you can leave a comment at Off The Ball AM on Twitter or on youtube.com/Off The Ball. And we're live every morning with Gillette Labs. Got the ultimate shave or your money back Neon Night Edition is available now. Are you saying that they're on the verge of becoming a dynasty?
It feels like it. I certainly feel like they are going to be the Premier League champions for the next couple of years, 2 or 3 seasons. It's hard to see anyone. Like, if that great Liverpool team could get 99 points and still not win a title, I just can't see an Arsenal pushing on enough. I can't see Liverpool or Manchester United pushing on enough.
I can see Liverpool. I think I thought Liverpool's end of the season, they've got strength and depth in the front 3. They've seemed to have worked out what to do with Trent. Like, that was their big conundrum, and they seem to have got to a point where they've evolved, so I could see them being back next season.
But there's still results at the end of that season with Liverpool where you're like, they're pushing for top 4 and they're dropping points in games that they can't afford to.
I think they were exhausted at that point.
Possibly, yeah.
You know, signing Alexis is a good signing. You know, I don't think it's transformative. We'll see. But it seems that they've got good value, and so they could go and add more. I don't know enough about Thuram to know what kind of impact he's going to have on the side. But
Chelsea, I don't know what Pochettino's going to do, but Chelsea have too big a squad. Maybe he's the man to manage that. And then Spurs with Ange Postecoglou is interesting. I think it might again take him a season or two to bed that in.
Top six
would be the target, yeah, for sure. He'll probably think that he can get Champions League football, and that'll be the target Daniel Levy sets to him. But
so look, you would expect Manchester City will be able to be back in the quarter-final, semi-final of the Champions League in relative rude health next season, but it does, I think a lot does depend on De Bruyne recovering his fitness, and like, bear in mind he's 32 turning 33, is that right? So if you take Gundogan out of the side, which looks likely at this point, there's massive offers coming in from all around the world for him. I don't think he's quite ready to go to Saudi Arabia, but maybe 88 or 100 million over 2 seasons changes your mind.
Well, look at the money N'Golo Kante is getting for
unbelievable.
De Bruyne is 32 in a fortnight,
right?
So he's still got a bit of time, but I mean, if he looks after himself, and how he recovers from this injury is going to be fairly key. They'll want to start next season fairly well.
But so it does look like Mahrez is going to leave, and it looks like Laporte's going to leave. Now they will replace them, so Kovacic looks like he's coming in, and he's an excellent midfielder and somebody who you assume they would trust. And who knows, like, does Calvin Phillips leave, or does Calvin Phillips become the next Manchester City player who takes 18 months to get a game and then suddenly is really good? I don't know. So I'm not writing them off, but I'm not penciling them in for like 3 Champions Leagues in a row here.
No, but I feel like, sorry, when I say dynasty, I mean like 3 Champions League in the next 5, 6, 7 years. I think that's still an era.
Oh, totally, yeah. If they were to do that, yeah. But I don't know if Pep's going to be around. I don't know if are they playing championship football for one of those seasons. Who knows? Right, Tailteann Cup quarter-final draw has been made. It's Antrim versus Carlow, Meath versus Wexford, Limerick versus Laois, and Cavan versus Down. So Cavan Down is obviously the pick of the quarter-finals, with both sides thinking that they were going to win this thing. And after that, you pays your money, you takes your choice.
I'm sickened. I really was hoping for a Cavan Down Tailteann Cup final. That was the juicy one.
Well, Antrim Meath is obviously the juicy.
True, yeah. Well, yeah, of course, from an Andy McEntee perspective, and they've avoided each other for now, so that'll be interesting. Home advantage, of course, for Antrim, Meath, Limerick and Cavan, because they top their groups. Those games next weekend. Fixture details will be confirmed by the CCCC later today. If you'd expect the group winners in those games to come through. So Antrim will fancy themselves against Carlow, Meath will fancy themselves against Wexford, and the 2 games, Limerick and Laois, I think Billy Sheehan will expect. Like, they went up to Brewster Park in Enniskillen at the weekend and had a really good result against Fermanagh, a good Fermanagh team. So they'll go to Limerick with hope and expectations. The Cavan Down one I can't really call. Like, the fact that it's in Breffni Park nudges it towards Cavan, but I did say Down would win the Tailteann Cup this year, so I'm going to have to stick with that.
All right. A reminder, OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shaver. Your money back in the online edition is available now, and Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. It's coming to an Applegreen store near you. New Braeburn locations are popping up every month. Visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn coffee experience, and you can enter our competition by following us on Twitter, and there are vouchers to be won. Now we're turning our attention back to football. I'm delighted to say Karen Duggan is with us. Karen, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Quite a long mid-season break for people not involved in the World Cup squad. So just a chance for everybody to recharge their batteries and consider where they are, or is it like, Jesus, the football was just getting good?
A bit of both, because we've had a pretty good run into the break, but we're also starting to pick up a few niggles. So in one way it's good that we've a bit of a break, but in other ways, like, we don't want to lose the momentum that we have built up over the last 3 or 4 games. But we do have that All-Ireland kind of cup to keep us ticking over, and to give more players game time that possibly didn't get as much as they would have liked in the first half of the season, because all of our games seemed to be really tight, so we couldn't make too many subs, unfortunately.
The World Cup squad and the players who are going away for the World Cup squad, obviously that's their main focus, but for you and
the players who were in the All-Ireland Cup, like how beneficial do you think that's going to be to broadening the player base generally across the league here, not just specifically for Peamount, but to give people that opportunity to get into squads and show to management teams that actually in the second half of the season they can have a significant impact?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. It's kind of like all county leagues that you play with GAA where the county players can't play, and it always does bring people up to speed. Because it's such a long season and there's no way you're going to have the same starting team from start to finish in a season like that. So you're going to depend on your squad, and to be able to give them game time at senior level, it's really, really good. Like, we have to go to Rovers again next week, and we'll probably play a different team to what we did this weekend, but that'll be a great experience for everyone. Like, senior game in Tala, up to the speed, and yeah, I think it's a really good idea, considering obviously we do have the big break for the World Cup. 2 months off would have been too much. It would have been almost like going back into pre-season after 2 months. So I think it's really, really good for everyone's squad, and yeah, people might take their opportunity and break into certain teams, which is great as well.
Record attendance at the weekend for that game, Karen. Like, I'm sure for the more experienced players like yourself, it's a little easier to deal with the pressure of that, but I guess for the younger players in the team, I'm sure it's quite a lot to deal with.
I don't think the younger players get fazed by too much, from what I've seen anyway. With their ones, nothing seems to faze them, but I have to say fair play to Rovers. They really did a lot of marketing for that game, brought in a lot of young girls teams, and it really did make for a really good atmosphere, because it was quite a tense match. It wasn't a huge amount of chances, but like, when you do have a crowd, it sounds cliche, but like, they do kind of give you a little bit more energy and get you kind of over the line in the end. So it was a great occasion, and to be like, the attendances have been breaking kind of every week between Bowes and Shamrock Rovers, so long may it last, I suppose.
Tara O'Hanlon is one of those young players that I guess we have to mention. I think she's going in to do her leaving cert this morning, and then joining the Ireland camp afterwards, which is pretty incredible when you think about it.
Tara is a special player. I was kind of speaking with a few people over the weekend about Tara, and for me, probably the most raw talent we've seen in the league since Katie McCabe. And she's really mature, and she has her head screwed on, and she put in another phenomenal performance at the weekend, up against another kind of senior international. She was up against internationals on their side, so she kind of shows that she is kind of already at that level. So I've no fear of Tara going into that camp with Vera Pound and making a claim for one of those spots on the plane.
Really, like actual spot on the plane as opposed to just the pre-tournament training camp?
I don't see why not. I think that left wing position suits her brilliantly. She's a natural left footer, and well, if you need cover for Megan Campbell rather than putting Katie McCabe back left wing back, I think Tara is next in line. But again, I'm seeing her, I suppose, at Women's National League level. It might be a different story when they get into camp, but from what I've seen, I think she's certainly in with a chance. She's not there to make up the numbers.
That is interesting. Do you feel like Vera Pauw is open to a bolter at this stage? Because she has said she is, and she has been casting around literally the entire globe to try and find players who might be able to make an impact. So it's not beyond the bounds of possibility, is it?
I don't think it is, because otherwise I think you would have just named your 23 and brought in training players, because it's harder to be in a squad and now you're potentially going to be dropped for the Australia flight. So that's not going to be an easy conversation. The easy way out for Vera would have been to just name her 23 and have it all done and have those conversations and just have the girls on standby. But the fact that the squad isn't finalised, I think it has to mean that she doesn't have her mind fully made up on who's coming, and she's going to give the girls an opportunity in this camp to make an impression.
Is it tough, Karen, for women's national league teams to hold on to players like Tara O'Hanlon? Because I guess when you're making comparisons with Katie McCabe, for example, the obvious I guess conclusion is going to be that at some stage she might move across to England and maybe get an opportunity there, but I guess the desire from the women's national league teams is to hold on to those players.
I think we're very realistic when it comes to that. We know that if we produce a player of that quality, that at some point they will go to a professional league, and that's just the reality of it, because they've said it for many years now, in order to make the Irish team, you kind of have to be playing at that professional level, and that's what these girls want to do. They want to play for their country, and they're going to do everything they can in order to do that. And realistically, the best way to do that now is to go professional, because we can't offer that in Ireland. So yeah, it's not something that is great, obviously, in terms of the league, but it's realistic that we can't hold on to players and for them to continue to progress their career in the way that they want while we're an amateur league. So we kind of just see it as almost a badge of honour, sending the girls off to professional leagues now, because obviously you feel like you've played a part in their career and what they can go on to do, and you're very proud of them when they do go away. But obviously it does dilute the talent in the league then somewhat, and people are starting to go away sooner and sooner now. I wish there was an under-21 Ireland team or something like that, where we kind of keep players in Ireland until they're that 21, 22 and they're matured, and then they have a real good chance of making it when they go away, and have a development path there while they're getting their education. But I think, again, that's probably something that's really far down the line. But I do think that key age group is that kind of 19, 20, and there's a big drop off there. And if we had a way to kind of develop those in Ireland, I think that would be really, really beneficial in the long run, both for the Irish League and for the girls themselves.
Yeah, and at the same time, the benefit for an 18-year-old to go full-time in a setup in the UK or America, you know, that quality of coaching that they're going to be able to get, and that full-time adherence to strength and conditioning and coaching and tactical and technical work, that's when you can make the big leap as well. So it's just finding that balance between players who are ready to go and those who actually would benefit from maturing a little bit for a couple of years.
Yeah, and the WSL, like the top league in England, is becoming like the real powerhouse of women's football internationally, and it's going to be like the men, where Irish girls are going to find it harder and harder to make it in the WSL, so they might have to look to go second division or possibly into Europe somewhere. And I just think that they'd be more ready for that transition if they were that little bit older, or potentially if they had those couple of years, they'd find the transition to the WSL a little bit easier. So who knows what will happen, but it's great to see the amount of girls that we are sending away, and the amount of talent that we are producing in this country that can compete at the highest level.
Am I right in saying, Karen, that your housemate is Amanda Budden, the Rovers keeper?
You are correct, yeah.
What's that like after a match like that?
It's grand, honestly. We just kind of laugh it off. She probably is better at laughing things off than I am, to be fair. But no, it's grand. We don't actually talk about it that much. We'll wind each other up a little bit, but it's all kind of like in good spirits, you know. There
was a match, was it last season or season before? 0-0 draw. She saves a penalty from you.
Oh, that was this season.
Was that this season? So, like, what's that like in the couple of days afterwards in the house?
Grand for her. No, it was fine. I mean, it was our other housemate's birthday. We just went out that night, and that was it. Like, you don't talk about it. She knew that I was obviously really upset about it, so she'd give me jibes if it was a bit of crack. But I took that one quite hard. So she kind of left me alone after that one.
It's funny, you can pick up the secrets, maybe a bit of practice in the back garden, see what way she usually moves.
No, I think she picked up what way I usually got in my head. She absolutely got in my head, to be fair to her. So I took myself off penalties at the weekend just in case we got one. I was like, I'm not going through that again.
The goal from Sive Doyle, another player who's really making moves as well. Like, just one of those games where you felt it could peter out to a 0-0, but the goal is obviously the bonus.
Yeah, I think realistically we probably would have been happy with a draw given the way the match was gone. They did have a lot of possession, but neither team really created all that much. I think they had one chance, we had one chance, and we just took ours, and fortunately theirs went over the bar. But other than that, I think the two keepers were pretty quiet, so it did kind of have 0-0 written all over it. And it might have been a fair result, but it's kind of been a feature of us this season that we've kind of kept going and ground out wins. Like, we haven't won any matches by big scores, top of the league or bottom of the league, but we've been managing to kind of grind out important wins. And that was a huge one for us, because like I said, we're going into the break now. We come back and there's 7 games left in the season, so we've got 13 games hard shift put in the first half of the season. So it's great to be in the position that we are, and that was a really, really important win because Rovers are a really good ball playing side, really good defensively as well. So they only gave us one opportunity, and thankfully we took it.
On balance, what's your feeling now about how good or otherwise Rovers are for the league? Because obviously when they came in and started signing everybody, there was rumblings of discontent, I suppose is a fair way of putting it.
I mean, Rovers, Rovers and Chelsea are the teams that we've dropped points against this season, and I think they're both going to be in contention after the break as well. From a P-Man point of view, we'll be kind of hoping that teams start taking points off each other around us to maybe help us out a bit. No one's going to want to do each other too many favours, but I do think that themselves and potentially even Bose will still feel like after the mid-season break that it's all to play for. Obviously, as a P-Man player, I'm emotionally scarred by the year we only needed 2 points from 2 games and couldn't do it. So there's definitely no one getting ahead of themselves, because obviously we've seen the talent that Shells have nicked a title off us before, and Rovers, they don't lose games. Like, that was their first loss of the season after 13 games for a brand new team. Like, that's really impressive to come in and do what they've done. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting.
I was talking earlier about the bottling, Manchester City bottling the defeats, the knockout Champions League defeats in the last number of years, and utilising that, like that dramatic final day against Shelbourne in 2021. Like, have you been able to bottle that and use it in a positive sense?
No, nothing positive came from that ever.
Right.
No, but this year it feels very different this year, because obviously Rovers did come into the league, and obviously there was a lot of movement around the league, and I think everyone feels like this year was a bit of a fresh start because of that. So maybe we've learned a little bit of resilience from that, and we've maybe grown a bit more bottled since then. But I don't think it's from that. I think it's just generally the attitude of the girls who've come into the squad and the young girls who are stepping up, because everyone's just really, really competitive at training. Everyone's really working hard for each other. Really nice group of girls. So we don't really reference that because, again, trauma. But no, it's a different feel, I think, this year.
Well, enjoy the break. It's not really a break, but obviously it's an official break from the league, and we'll talk to you again in plenty of time to start the build-up to the World Cup. Has it begun to feel like the build-up to the World Cup has kicked off?
Not as much as I would have thought, but I think maybe now that the girls are going into camp today, that we'll start seeing more of them together as a group, and they'll be based obviously in Ireland, and we'll maybe start seeing more in the media, more interaction with them, and grow the hype around it. Obviously you don't want to start the hype too soon either and get World Cup fatigue, but it's such a special year for women's football. Like, in my opinion, the more we see of it, the better. So hopefully there is a big bounce now, and people start writing about it, talking about it, getting interviews with the girls and stuff like that. Obviously Vera will want to keep them very concentrated in camp, especially if she really doesn't have her mind made up on who's on that final flight. So interesting couple of weeks ahead to see how this training camp goes.
Yeah, a few tricky conversations to be had with that. All right, Karen, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
It's
Karen Duggan there, of course. You can hear her on the Koi Gig podcast every week as well. It's 11 minutes past 9 this morning. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Obviously we'll start seeing those press conferences. I think the team in their Ireland gear at training is going to be the thing that reminds everybody, we can start our official World Cup build up. Here is some stuff for you to look at on the OTB podcast network today. Keith Tracy was talking about the Champions League final. Tommy Walsh in pretty good form in the aftermath of the Kilkenny-Galway game, and James O'Connor was covering Limerick against Clare for us. All of that available wherever you get your podcasts. After the break, we are going to hear from Cathal Dennehy talking about the Rashidat Adeleke hype train, which is officially up and running. It's a TGV at this point, but first, the cash machine.
Off the balls, cash machine.
Sharon Bradley was with her work colleagues on Friday when the cash machine call came her way. She answered just in time. and the celebrations may go on all week. 2.4 million given away so far this year. We're looking to brighten up summer for more people. Taking part's easy. Every day we give you an amount, you take note, you enter, and if it's you that we call on Monday, you tell us the amount and you win that cash. The summer cash machine has been reloaded. It's €10,748.18. To enter, text OTB and only OTB to 57557. If it's you that we call after 3 o'clock on Monday, the 12th of June, answer your phone within 5 rings and tell us the prize amount and you'll win the money. Text OTB to 57557. The cost is $2.50 plus standard message rate to play. You have to be over 18. You're playing across the Go Loud network of stations, and full terms are on our website at offtheball.com. You have to have your entry in by 3 o'clock on Monday. That's today. The cash machine will then randomly pick one entry, and it could be you that we're calling. Answer within 5 rings. Tell us the prize amount, and the money is yours. €10,748.18. OTB to 57557. Back after these.
Off the Ball's cash machine.
Top pocket goal! Ahead of this summer's football in Australia, we're going to Australia.
It's what dreams are made of.
We'll be hosting a night of celebration for the Republic of Ireland women's national team in partnership with Sky, and it's coming your way on June 28th in the Mansion House in Dublin. What a moment for the Republic of Ireland. We'll be joined by the full squad.
I don't know what we've just done. I did believe we could do it.
As well as some other great guests as we give the team a night to remember. Emma Byrne is in tears.
I can't believe it. We've finally done it.
Tune into all of Off the Ball's channels for a chance to win tickets to this exclusive event.
Sky, proud primary partners of the Republic of Ireland women's national team.
Outbelieve together, and we can go anywhere.
They are going to the World Cup Finals!
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, it's 14 minutes past 9. We're turning our attention to athletics and basically one of the biggest stories in Irish sport over the course of the weekend. It's Rashidat Adeleke becoming the first Irish sprinter to win an NCAA title. Cathal Dennehy, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, good, Ger. How are you?
Give us a little bit of context for this, will you? Because I think people are kind of trying to grapple with exactly how big an achievement, how fast a time, and how globally important this is.
I'd say it's huge on every front you just mentioned. 49:20 is a time that would have placed her second in the last Olympic final. It would have placed her second in the last World Final in Oregon. Now, there's a bit of context there in terms of, as we look to the future, the level is going up in the women's 400, and I think in the next World Final in August and in the next Olympic final next August, it's going to take more than 49:20 to get on a podium. However, there's no denying how huge this is for Irish athletics and even for Irish sport. No Irish sprinter has ever won an NCAA title. Traditionally, the best athletes we sent to the US were always middle distance runners, and those are the athletes who kind of succeeded, I suppose, through the 70s, 80s, 90s. We've had 9 NCAA champions in the past. All middle distance runners, I think, besides one hammer thrower. The likes of Eamon Coughlin, Sonia Sullivan have won NCAA titles, but we've never had a sprinter win any medal. We've never had a sprinter go over there and get close. And Rashidat has not just gone over there and got close, she's gone over there and conquered the US collegiate scene at 400 metres. It's a time that's number 3 in the world this year. And when you 49:20, you're talking she's only currently 2 or 3 metres off the best in the world, which is Marilady Paulino, who's winning Diamond Leagues on the circuit. And the number 2 ranked athlete in the world is Britton Wilson with 49:1 this year. Rashidat has just run faster than her. And even if you take indoors, Femke Bol of the Netherlands set a world indoor record of 49:23, I think it was, back in February, and Rashidat has just gone faster than that. So yeah, it's very, very exciting for Irish athletics and Irish sport.
And just to put more context, like all these stories, people begin to come to the story and kind of trying to find out exactly what's going on or where it's come from. She was never a 400 metre runner really at any point in her career up until the last kind of 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And she only actually started joining training with the 400 metre group in Texas last October. So essentially, in her first year or two, her coach there, Edric Floriel, got her running 200s. She went over there as a 200 metre specialist. But I think her previous coach, even Dan Kilgallen, would tell you they always kind of knew her future lay in the 400, and especially at a college like Texas. They have such a big budget. They have their pick of sprint talent to choose from, and when you're picking from the best of Caribbean and US athletes, there's so many good 100 meter and 200 meter runners. So with an athlete like Rashidat, especially with her height, her stride, they were always going to look to move her towards the 400. And I think many people who followed her career, they saw she was fast, clearly, at 200 she was a European under 20 champion, but I think everyone knew that once she moved to 400 she'd run some astonishing relay splits in 2021. And then of course once she moved last year, she finished 9th in the world at the age of 19 in an event she wasn't even training for at the World Championships, and then she finished 5th in the European final, having made some tactical errors as still a teenager against Europe's best seniors. So I think everyone knew once this starts to click and once she fully starts training for the 400, this could be mind-blowing. And to be honest, it is already mind-blowing at the age of 20.
You were right, Cathal, about the fact that you being a contender at world and Olympic level, as Rashidat clearly now is, you're going to have shoe brands knocking on your door. You're going to have offers of 6-figure contracts, and the temptation will be there to turn professional in advance of the Olympics. But will she, do you reckon, stay in the amateur game, because NCAA level is significant enough, and there are advantages to that as well?
Yeah, I think the big advantage in terms of staying where she is that, it's something she knows a year out from the Paris Games, and it wouldn't be a change in her routine. Some athletes do turn professional and then stay based at the college. They might even still attend classes. It's just they can't compete in that NCAA system anymore. So I think perhaps that would be the best option for her. But like I said, there will be a 6-figure per year contract put on the table. I remember even been at an event back in February indoors in New York, and one of the heads of sports marketing for one of the big brands came talking to me about Rashidat in terms of what I thought about her and things like that, and they had already sat down with her at that point. But again, I think really the decision will come down to her and perhaps her coach, and a lot of times certain coaches are aligned with certain brands and certain agents, so a lot can depend on that. Those offers will be being put in front of Rashidat this week. She'll be sitting down with agents and trying to decide the next step. And a lot of times if you sign for a certain brand, you get kind of moved towards a certain training group. If it was Adidas, it might be Lance Browman, who's trains the Olympic champion, and Shawnee Miller-Weibo. If it was Nike, maybe it'd be Bobby Kersey over in the West Coast, who trains Sydney McLaughlin-Navarone, the 400 meter hurdles world record holder. So that can influence a lot. Which brand you sign for and which agent you sign for might determine which coach you stay with. But I think if you're looking at what Rashidat has done over the past 2 years since joining Edric Floriel at Texas, there's no reason for her now to go anywhere else. And I think she is that kind of athlete. She's very sensible, and she, when we spoke to her back in March about turning pro, I don't think the money is the driving force for her. I think, it's success and medals. And I think she and Edric will be sensible enough to try and keep things as consistent as possible, because we have a very realistic medal contender on our hands next year. So I think she'll do everything she can to kind of keep things going in the direction they are.
Certainly college football players can now earn money from endorsements in a way that they weren't allowed to. I presume the same rules apply to athletes?
They do, and I actually thought that this was the case for all athletes, but I believe someone pointed out to me yesterday that NIL contracts can't apply to international students. So I think the vast majority of athletes in the NCAA are obviously American.
Right.
But I think there is an issue there with visas, and that their visas based on an educational visa, and perhaps if they're earning money, that changes things. So I think that again would push the kind of balance towards Rashidat turning pro, because you could be leaving a lot of money behind to stay in the NCAA for another year.
Yeah, and I don't know, we always end up talking about these, but particularly a lot of the athletes are, and people aren't really familiar with this, but you're carded, but you earn a certain amount of money from the government, but it can be breadline level once you take into account travel, coaching and all that kind of stuff. And obviously the coaching will be looked after from her scholarship, but there are no rich athletes who are competing for Ireland on the international stage who aren't global superstars, and we don't have any of those at the moment, except in this instance now we do.
Yeah, we do, and I think Rashidat for the next several years will never, struggle financially, in terms of she'll have the top level backing from Sport Ireland. She'll have, if she decides to come home at any stage, she'll have all the medical resources put in front of her. And if she decides to stay in the US, given what she's achieved, she'll be signed to a multi-year contract by a shoe brand, and she will have all the support she needs. But at the same time, there's so much money flowing through the collegiate programs. Her coach is rumoured to be on a a very high 6-figure salary for doing what he's doing in Texas, and there's so many resources. I think it's worth $70,000 or $80,000 a year, even just her scholarship for an international student. And there's so much, whether it's psychological backup, medical backup, whatever she needs, she has on her doorstep at Texas. So I think she will probably look at it and say, a year out from Paris, why would I change anything?
The psychological backup that you mentioned there, Cal, clearly is working, because Rashidat seems to be really mentally very, very strong. You listen to her interviews, and even talking about this race, she was saying, the rivalry with Britton Wilson, I don't feel anyone is supposed to go in as favourite. There's rankings, but they don't mean anything until you run the race. Like, for someone of 20 years of age, she seems very, very mature.
She does, and I think anyone who looked at Rashidat's progress and her year today would have said, she's going to run low 49 seconds at some stage soon. But I think what was most impressive is that she did it under pressure, and she is showing consistently an ability that, when I think of Irish athletes, you think of maybe Derval O'Rourke or someone like that, where it's not just the fact that they produce whatever their best was throughout the season, it's that they kind of unlock an extra gear on the biggest stage. And Rashidat is doing that. She did it at European under-20 level. She'd be running PBs in the European under-20 finals to win those medals. And now she's doing it at NCAA level. Last year, she did it in Oregon, ran her best race in the world semi-final. And everyone thought she has to be cooked, by August. She's been racing for 6 months, but she ran her, I think it was her 50th race of the year, that European final, and she ran her 400 metre PB. And now with all the pressure on, and it's not just pressure on Rashidat to win the individual title, Texas were relying on her points to rack up a big tally in that 400 metres, and they're on their home turf as well, in front of more than probably 10,000 fans, I think, in that stadium on Saturday night. And with everyone, the lens on her, she stepped up to another level again. And that is such an impressive quality in an athlete. And as we look towards the future, even if you take this year's World Championships in Budapest and next year's Olympics in Paris, I don't think Rashidat, to be honest, will be feeling any more pressure than she felt on Saturday night in front of the Texas crowd. So I think that's a very good sign that she's able to psychologically not just maintain what she's doing, but actually ascend to a higher level.
I know you're making the point about not changing too much in advance of the Olympics in Paris. Would there be a consideration at some point for doing the Diamond League as preparation for that, and getting that on-track experience against the other contenders for medals? Or is it better to be slightly out of that and just come to the Olympics? I guess, how do you plot the course, taking into consideration all of the variables?
Well, I think it'll all depend if she turns pro or not. If she does turn pro, that'll happen in the next few weeks, and we'll have our news on that soon, I'm sure. And if that happens, Rashidat will be out there on the on the Diamond League circuit this summer, and certainly next summer. The NCAA is a great racing system. It's a great proving ground to prepare you for competing at the world and Olympic level. The standard is probably only a few % different. The only real difference is almost the depth, because these are ready-made champions that come out of the NCAA. Typically, they're ready-made medalists if you conquer the NCAA in a sprint event. So I think if she does turn pro, the build up to the Paris Olympics will feature a lot of Diamond Leagues. I can't see her returning to an Irish base. I would expect perhaps she'll stay with Edric regardless, even if she does turn pro, and remain training in Texas for the next year. And then I think her racing opportunities will start opening up to the Diamond Leagues, because there's things like appearance fees, there's good prize money, but also I think perhaps more importantly than that, it's a chance to race the athletes she's going to be racing, to reach an Olympic final next year, the likes of Shauna Miller-Weebo, the likes of Sydney McLaughlin.
Yeah.
It might only be a handful of races, but I think we can expect to see her out there on the circuit. And if not this summer, then certainly next summer.
Can you do both? Could she stay amateur and then still appear in Diamond League but not take the prize money? Is that possible? Is there a
I think, yeah, you can actually do that, I think, but I think very few do, because the NCAA system kind of requires you to race so much. Like I said, 50 races last year. Rashidat ran between the kind of summer, I suppose, championship races and the NCAA races throughout this early spring and early summer. So I think just because of that, I think the energy wise and preparation wise, it wouldn't make much sense to get out there on the circuit if she does continue racing in the NCAA.
She seems ready-made to take advice as well, Cal, because I'm just judging that based off her improvements and the times and breaking the record constantly. The Michael Johnson tweet from a number of months back, where he said, look out when she learns to use those arms. She's carrying them instead of using them to drive the legs. The difference is significant over 400, helps increase speed and reduce fatigue. I mean, you'd imagine she's taken some of that advice on board, because she has improved so much.
Absolutely, and I think Rashidat, it's such an unfair thing to compare anyone to Usain Bolt, but when I think of Rashidat, in terms of we used to be commentating on her races back when she was 14 years old, running for Tala, running for Terranure in the schools championships, and you could see then she was taller than all her competitors, and it was kind of like Bambi on ice when she'd be coming out of the blocks. Her technique would be all over the place, and it kind of did remind me of Usain Bolt when you see the footage of him when he was 15, still beating his competitors who were far more kind of mechanically sound at that point. But you could see the engine was there and the talent was there, and that once someone kind of cleaned up her technique and got her running kind of closer towards the best technical model of sprinting, she was going to absolutely take off into the stratosphere, and that's what she's done. And I think there's huge credit, while Adric Floriel will be getting so much deserved credit for the work he's done over the last 2 years at Texas. For the previous couple of years before that, Dan Kilgallen at Tala, who is one of, if not the best, Irish athletics coaches, and does it all in an amateur capacity. He took over Rashida's career, and you could very easily grab the low-hanging fruit with an athlete like that. You could say, right, I want her to win a world junior medal, I want her to smash the Irish records at the age of 17. And he knew from talking to Rashidat and her mother that she was going to go towards the NCAA system down the line. And instead of kind of taking that short-term view, he got her in the gym, with Claire Brady at the Sport Ireland Institute, and his focus for those couple of years was on cleaning up her technique, so that when she ascended to the kind of heavier, higher level of training that's required to be a world-class sprinter, she wouldn't break down. And I think so much of what we're seeing now in Rashidat comes back to those couple of years of kind of foundational work that Daniel did on her technique and her strength to prepare her to kind of survive and thrive in the NCAA.
Is there room for more Irish sprinters now to consider going to America? Because there was a period of time where people were thinking that actually the best thing to do is to stay in Ireland. We've got a lot of supports here, but that actually maybe this is going to make some people consider about going back to the States and taking advantage of that system as well.
Yeah, I think Irish athletics has completely changed, in the last 10, 15 years. The effective immigration and the kind of different genetic pool we have to choose from now in athletics has also kind of boosted that spread of abilities. It's not just middle distance runners that Ireland is producing. We do have some field eventers. We nearly had a world junior medalist last year in Rhys Ademola, and obviously Rashidat, and there's many others like her coming up through that system in the school system, and they're very talented sprinters that Ireland is now producing. So yeah, I think the doors are starting to open. I think traditionally though, the NCAA, those US colleges, given they had the best of Caribbean and US talent to choose from, they didn't really need European sprinters, so they didn't really recruit European sprinters all that much. Rashida's talent level was just off the charts as a teenager, so they obviously were all going after her. But I think what we will see more of now is that, more Irish sprinters, and there are a few others that kind of, I suppose, lesser accomplished colleges around the US, and I think we will see more of that in the years ahead, where it's not just our middle and long distance talent that goes to the US.
I know we can sometimes get carried away with our young athletes, Cathal, in this country, but you mentioned Derval O'Rourke. She was on the show recently, and she said that she believes she's going to be one of Ireland's greatest ever sports people, Rashidat Adeleke. Would you go along with that?
I think so, but I do also, I think when you're tweeting about Rashidat and stuff, you can see there's always a huge reaction, and there's always an incredible amount of support comes in, but I just always get a bit hesitant when you see some of the very confident predictions that float around, just because that so much can go wrong between the ages of 20 and 23 for any athlete, and between any age really. I think Seb Coe said every great athlete is only a hamstring tear away from oblivion. And that is the case with someone like Rashidat. It's all perfect now, but there'll be a time where she gets injured, maybe she gets sick, maybe she gets off form, or anything in her personal life. There's so many things that can go wrong in the development of an athlete. But I will say this, she is the best placed, an Irish athlete has probably ever been at the age of 20. And I think when I look towards the Paris Olympics, there are some people who are kind of almost hanging the medal around her neck right now. But Rashidat is currently where she needs to be. She's running low 49 seconds. She's up there with the best in the world right now. But I look towards the women's 400 metres down the line at the Paris Olympics, and you will have Shawnee Miller-Weibo, who's coming back from maternity leave. She's a 48.3 athlete, two-time Olympic champion. You Sydney McLaughlin, who's eyeing up a double. She's run under 48 seconds in a relay, and she's supposedly training to try and break the 400-metre world record. She will also, if she opts for the 400 metres, be running in the low to mid 48 seconds next year. You've Paulino, the world leader, who's already running 48.9. She'll probably be dropping down through the 48s. And then you've the 2019 world champion, Salva Eid Nasser, who was banned for anti-doping whereabouts violations, and she's just about returning. She's already gone under 50 seconds, and I'd expect her probably be back down under 49 seconds. So if you're talking Paris Olympics, I think it's going to take under 49, probably in the low to mid 48 second kind of time to win an Olympic medal, which is a huge ask. But again, Rashidat has got to 49.20 at the age of 20. So as long as she stays healthy, stays doing what she's doing, there's no reason she won't be going right down into those 48 seconds next year and up there with the very, very best in the world.
Budapest is August this year. That's the World Athletics Championships. Is there do we know an obvious pathway between now and then? How many times we'll see her in the meantime?
I would expect she'll probably take a week off now and go on a holiday maybe, or just chill out over in Texas. But I think part of competing for Ireland is you're expected to run at the national championships, which are at the end of July. So she will probably stay in Texas for the majority of summer under the watchful eye of Edric. And then she has said she intends at the moment anyway to compete at the European Under-23 Championships, which are the middle of July in, I think, Estonia. I'm still sceptical if they're looking towards winning the world medal, whether she will show up there, and whether it would make sense for her to kind of fly transatlantic to compete there, and maybe that just after kind of what the NCAA season she's had, maybe a slow build up towards Budapest and just getting some freshness back in her legs might be the best option. But I think, the next time we might see her compete, probably if she does go for those European Under-23s, I think they're in the middle of July, and then national championships are the end of July. But I think that the place will certainly be seeing Rashidat, assuming she stays healthy for the next 2 months, will be at those World Championships, which I think kick off on the 18th or 19th of August.
All right, Carl, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Cathal Dennehy there, talking to us about the situation with Rashidat Adeleke at 9:34 this morning. We are live every morning with Gillette Labs. Got the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. On tomorrow's show, reaction to John Klein's South Africa move. Build-up begins to the Republic of Ireland against Greece, and plenty more besides. Right now, the Sunday Paper Review looks at some of the big stories in Irish football. Have a magnificent Monday.
We're reviewing the Sunday papers. Cliona O'Connor here in studio, who coaches in the worlds of GA and Irish hockey. Timmy McCarthy, Irish basketball captain and coach as well in his time. Let's turn to pages 16 and 17 of the Sunday Independent, because this is potentially a monumental development in Irish football and Irish sport. Dan McDonald here is looking at the FAI's facility investment and vision strategy, which sounds terribly boring, but is actually very interesting. So the FAI have at last got their act together, and they have put together a document which is evidence-based, and it lays out a plan for the future. And they've marched into Leinster House and said, we need 863 million, and this is what we're going to do with it. And Dan McDonald starts his piece by saying that he got a message from an elected member of Leinster House on Thursday evening, and the message from that senator or TD was, the FAI, this is a message to Dan, by the way, not necessarily a public statement, the FAI have stopped apologising for themselves. It's ballsy. Here's our plan. This is the state of the place. This is the price tag to fix it. Here's how you can give us the money. They've gone political, and it's long overdue. Like, such an interesting message, even that alone. We'll get into the specifics in a moment, but clearly there was a sense, if that TD or senator is speaking on behalf of any portion of Leinster House, there's a sense that the FAI were never serious about coming forward and saying, here's the plan, give it to us, this is what we need. And almost this is the first time that the FAI have put on their grown-up pants and decided to behave like a proper organisation.
I think so. Well, I think they it seemed to me that the FAI always thought they could just do their own thing. They can just, we're over here and we're a little bit separate and we'll just manage our own affairs. But there seems to be an honesty with this strategy that, but I guess they've had all their dirty laundry aired out in public anyway, so there's no secrets anymore. So now they've had to come forward and say, right, this is a mess, this is what we need, this is what it's going to cost now. Like every other governing body in the country, can you help us? And maybe there's a bit of humility needed to come and say, we need help to sort this out. And it is it seems like people would find that a little bit refreshing.
Yeah.
You know, we everybody wants football to do well. Of course we do. It's a good sport, and as a country we like football. So why wouldn't we want to help? Presuming all ducks are in a row and they're doing the right thing. Of course we would.
And it would give you faith, I think, if that amount of money is handed over, that it will be scrutinised by a centralised body, be it the government or elsewhere. So it's, you know, a kind of further monitoring of what's going on with the FAI, which mightn't be a bad thing. Dan McDonald writes, everything in the John Delaney era was an illusion, a product of the weak leadership, shorn of the confidence to admit that things needed to be better, largely because it might have highlighted the extent to which they were failing. That's why the refreshing element of this facility scheme is that it points out just how bad things are on the ground. The strongest section concentrated on the facts. And so the piece pointed out that the Tallaght Stadium aside, League of Ireland stadiums haven't moved on from the 1990s really. Turner's Cross, the only other venue to meet a respectable European standard. Most grassroots clubs don't own their own base. A quarter of clubs aren't even eligible to apply for sports grants, and 38% lack a functioning female toilet. 38%.
She was all smoke and mirrors, Joe. You know, it was based on this.
I thought it'd be like a Jacks out the back.
Yeah.
Do you know, I mean,
doors,
I'm not saying, you know, it was female friendly at every turn, but like just a toilet.
Yeah, there you go. Like that's reality. And then so again, so clubs not eligible to apply for all those sports grants. There's so many things you have to have in place to be eligible. They can't even apply. That's how far behind the curve they are on grassroots level. It's so in contrast to what we've been made believe for the past 10 or 20 years.
Yeah. Dan says that there is like an occasional oasis in the desert across Irish football where you come across a good club, but he says that just brings back memories of the FAI's Festival of Football years, which he says was an orgy of novelty check writing that perpetuated the myth that all was well in Ireland's football family. And he goes on to say that the findings of this FAI report won't surprise anybody. The FAI's plan recommends solutions. It proposes methods of funding. In many respects, the top line figure is the 517 million requested from the government over the 15 years, so an average of 34 million per annum, although that's front loaded very, very heavily. And it stresses as well there'll be like a multi-sport use aspect, and that's a smart tactic in his opinion. League of Ireland stadia, 250 million required there. He says that'll need more explanation. And a final point, Robert Watt, who is Secretary General of the Department of Health, and to be fair has been a contentious figure in Irish life in recent times, but he is on the board of the FAI, and Dan says that allows that board to ask the right questions in the right places. Much as he is a contentious figure in Irish public life at the moment, he still comes armed with knowledge and expertise which will surely be of benefit to this plan. So Dan finishes by saying that "This is football's time" is the slogan, and it could just as easily have been called "It's about time." So, Timmy, I think everybody's encouraged by just the transparency and the grown-up nature of the FAI laying it all out. This is what we need. It's a huge sum of money, but here's why we need it. Up to you, government, as opposed to, well, I don't know how you want to characterise the previous 30, 40 years, but it wasn't this.
Well, I think there's a couple of points that Dan caught that are very important in the context of how this has been framed by the FAI. First of all, he called out the strongest section concentrated on the facts. And in the second last paragraph, he said he succeeded in focusing away from personalities and back onto the plight of the people who play and support the game. And I just thought those two comments really is the nub of this. I mean, obviously the money will get the highlights, 863 million and 570 million over 15 years. That's a lot of cash. That's a lot of money that they're looking for in that sense. But I love the fact that what they've called out is, they've done a professional job. They're dealing with facts, not dealing with illusions or emotions. They're just dealing with the facts of what the game needs. over the next 15 years. And it needs investment. For a sport that is, a huge sport in this country and obviously internationally in that sense. And if we don't put the investment in, then, we end up with situations where, you don't have functioning female toilets. You don't have clubs can apply for grants. So you get what you pay for ultimately in this sense. So those two lines to me were really important in Dan's piece that he called out, that is based on, not based on personalities, but on the people and the people who support it, and based on facts. The other thing I thought was fascinating was they had the courage to call out the big numbers. Because if you look at the FAI and the PR that they've got over the last number of years and how they've handled their business in the Delaney era and the financial mess that was created at different points in time, to come out, with a document, 85-page game plan, and to say we need almost €1 billion, is really kind of takes a lot of courage. Takes a lot of courage when you consider where they're coming from in that sense. So I thought to myself, I don't know the detail of the document, obviously, Joe, but reading Dan's piece, what it did was made a point that this is good for football. Now, whether the politicians get on board or whether they get the funding, that's the journey that they have to undertake in that sense. But it's good for football because it's saying to everybody involved in football, League of Ireland clubs and obviously the FAI and other clubs, you've got to get your act together. We're no longer going to be second-class citizens. If we really want the game to be top class, well, then we have to invest. We have to get the government to invest, but we have to invest. And we have to make sure that, we have facilities and we have structures that allow us become eligible for grants and become part of a world that that everybody can go in and enjoy the spectacle of soccer, in facilities and that are appropriate. And I think the other point you called out, it's multi-sport. I think one of the big questions in this country is the lack of municipal sporting venues. If you look at the continent, the amount of municipal sporting venues where they can play a range of sports, where we tend to be singular sports in the main, even though I know there's been some crossover in the last couple of years for big events. But in general, GA playing GA pitches, rugby playing rugby pitches, soccer playing soccer pitches. So the fact that multi-sport is part of their strategic thought process, I think will win them a lot of friends and give the politicians a chance to support it because of the multi-sport aspect. So I was very impressed with it, Joe, from what I read about it, and I thought Dan's piece captured it very succinctly in the end.
In the Mail on Sunday, there's a slightly different focus to Phillips Quinn's piece on this strategic launch. So he says, deep into the second half of the FAI's 15-year investment spiel in Abbottstown on Thursday, Jonathan Hill was briefly rattled. Up to then, the CEO had been foot perfect until he was asked about why there was no primary sponsor for men's football. It's 3 years since Three Disconnected was brought up by the Mail Sport, and Hill bristled, writes Philip Quinn. So he says, rather than acknowledge the glaring hole in the FAI, a family of blue chip sponsors, he looked to gloss over the omission. He became bullish, says Philip Quinn, about the new kit sponsorship contract, and he said that was worth more than the Three and the Umbro kit deals combined. The FAI still doesn't have a primary sponsor, and that counts against Hill, who will be 3 years in the job in October, says Philip Quinn. And he then goes on to note as well, Hill has done a decent job at the helm, but the absence of a name on the sports and leisure wear on Stephen Kenny and his coaching staff and the Ireland players ahead of Friday's qualifier against Greece is not a good look. Is Hill holding out for too much? Possibly. Is he finding Stephen Kenny's Ireland a hard sell? Possibly. And then he notes as well that really Stephen Kenny isn't across much of the 86-page brochure. So he says that Vera Pauw was praised, the Ireland underage teams too, the full houses at League of Ireland grounds, but Kenny was the invisible man. His photo was nowhere to be seen in the FAI's glossy 86-page brochure. Pauw's was, Katie McCabe was even more prominent. Denise O'Sullivan got a full page, as did the Ireland women's team too. Chidozie Ogbene was the lead photo on one page and appeared elsewhere along with Gambazzuno and McCabe. Why was Kenny missing? perhaps there was a clue earlier when Jonathan Hill said that 2024 in practical terms was likely the starting point of the timeline for investment. Are the FAI preparing for a 2024 without Kenny? Is that why he was omitted from the document? Omitting the Ireland manager from such a groundbreaking charter certainly appears more than a little strange. Kathleen, if you were Stephen Kenny, would you be reading into that?
Probably. Well, I think soccer managers read into everything, don't they? It's the nature of the game. But I think it seems to be like the FAI, they're going potentially a different route with this. They need to rebrand themselves or reimagine or reposition themselves. So again, in Dan McDonald's piece, they're talking about the convincing numbers around participation, popularity with new communities, health and societal benefits. So they're not talking about the senior men's team. Why is it that they don't believe in it? Is it as a hard sell? I don't really know, but you can rationalise why they wouldn't. And it's, what are they putting front and centre in all their flagship document? It's the women's team, it's their various young up and coming players, it's their different communities. That's what they're talking. That's what they want people to talk about. They seem to want to divert attention away. They don't from the men's team. They don't want to talk about the fact that they have no sponsor. That's really not great if you don't have a title sponsor for that team. And you can see why they're doing it. But it does raise other questions, I think, about where they're going to invest all potential sponsorship that they get or funding that they get. What are they actually going to do with it?
Yeah. Stephen Kenny, to me, is surely a good story to tell, though, in many ways. He is of the League of Ireland. He did brilliant things with the League of Ireland team. He's graduated to the senior team. He has brought through an entire generation of young players. They had a very respectable draw against France just this year. I mean, I actually think it's a strange move to almost omit him from this document. Would they, if they were paying some, I don't know, I don't want to pick any nationality in particular, but if they're paying like a foreign manager who's never been to a League of Ireland game in his life $2 million to look over the men's national side, is that, a great story to tell? I find the omission of Kenny here very strange. Like, do they back him or do they not?
But do they not know how to sell it? They don't know how to sell. That's a kind of, oh yeah, he's doing well, and he is when you lay it all out. But is that a marketable piece for them? Is that something that they can really sell? I don't know. They should be able to.
I think across 86 pages, maybe.
Yeah, maybe one paragraph.
Quick set. Really. What do you think, Timmy? Would you be reading into that if you were Kenny?
I'd read into it. I definitely would read into it for a number of reasons. First of all, if you think of their strategic plan, there's a big focus on the League of Ireland, and as you just called out, his relationship with the League of Ireland, is a success in the sense of his success in the league, and now the fact that he's the national manager in that sense. Secondly, he called out, about the fact the team needs to qualify for more tournaments. So that he pinned that firmly on Kenny at that point in that sense. And I thought the thing about the sponsorship, the fact that he didn't actually just deal with the fact that they don't have a title sponsor, and that's something that he needs to address as the chief executive. It was really sort of lacking courage, in my view, from his perspective. But from Kenny's perspective, there's no doubt. So if you have an 86-page document, and yes, the women are going to the World Cup, so they should get pride and pace because that's the next tournament that Ireland will play in the sense of the final stages. That should be front and centre. But not to have your current men's national manager front and centre of this document, is baffling because, I know you were thinking of names, Joe, but, go back to Jack Charlton. Are you telling me if Jack Charlton was manager of the Irish team today, he wouldn't be front and centre of that document, to increase the credibility of the document. So I believe that's from Kenny's point of view, that there's no doubt that the focus is getting to the Euros, obviously, in that sense, from the FAI and from Kenny's point of view. But you have to question, is Hill committed in the long term to Kenny?
Yeah, because it's funny that when I was struggling to think of a name, it's weird. Big Sam just popped into my head. So I don't know, if you're going to government and saying we're trying to become very self-sufficient and develop young players, and here we have a League of Ireland manager who's come through and done great things in Europe and is now bringing a next generation through, that is a good story to sell if you're looking for taxpayers' money, as opposed to, there's Big Sam, we pay him £3 million a year, isn't that great? So I think there's a lot to, even if you're being cynical about it, to point to if you're looking for taxpayers' money with Kenny.
There's no doubts in that, and I'm sure that when you think of Stephen Kenny, where he's come from, as we talked about earlier, and he's Irish. He's not a Big Sam who pops in and just
all due respect to Big Sam, of course.
Yeah, no, but I mean, and that's why I mentioned Jack Charles, because Jack obviously had a successful.
Yeah, or throwing millions at Trapattoni, who did a fine job. But again, Kenny's a better story to tell.
So why aren't they?
Why aren't they?
Why aren't they then?
Well, I believe Hill is not. I believe Joe Hill is not convinced.
Yeah.
I believe Hill is not convinced. That's basically what I would say. I don't believe Hill is convinced about Kenny. I mean, I've said this previously, John, on this program, other sports program, on Off the Board, that we don't have a talented team now. Let's be very clear. This is one of the weakest Irish teams we've had in years. We don't have a goal scorer. Okay, right? If you look at the number of players we have in the Premiership compared to previous eras, we're really struggling in that sense. And what he's done, he's brought a new era of Irish football and a new era of players who can play internationally. And if we're to be successful internationally, we can only be successful with the type of football that Kenny ultimately wants us to play in that sense. And hopefully we get some better players. I mean, over the last few days, I was thinking of Jack Grealish and Declan Rice. Those two players, the difference they would have made to this Irish team if they had been part of it in that sense. So I think that Kenny is a really good story in a lot of ways from that perspective. And I just don't believe that Hill has faith in him. And I think that, when you read through it, and even the point about the focus getting on Euro 2024, if Kenny doesn't get results, in the Euros, it's hard to see him survive beyond this under the currency year.
That's the tone of Philip Quinn's analysis anyway in that piece on page 73 of the Mail on Sunday. Just one other quick point to mention. David Kelly, alongside that Dan McDonnell article, is talking about what was on quite a few of the back pages, which is Vera Pauw is in talks about a new contract ahead of the World Cup, and David Kelly in the Sunday Independent writes, with Ireland's female players having achieved equal pay, it remains to be seen whether the cash-strapped FAI might afford the same deference to their manager as Pauw, appointed in 2019, discusses a second contract extension. Ireland men's team boss Stephen Kenny is on a salary reported to be around $500,000 per annum, has yet to qualify for a major tournament. Pauw, who is believed to be on a salary worth $150,000 before add-ons. So she's certainly negotiating from a position of strength. Does she walk in and say, well, if Kenny's on $500,000 and if the female and male players are on the same pay structure, albeit that's a less expensive gap for the FAI than $150,000 to $500,000, does Pauw go in there and say, well, I think $500,000 is appropriate here?
Well, I think she's in a very strong place to negotiate, and I think she is brave enough to go for it from the last, what we've seen from the last couple of years, and I also think that there's a reality, like we're talking about that 86-page document where she's all over it, her players are all over it, they are squeezing every bit of PR, marketability, this World Cup, they are going to take it for everything they can in terms of positive PR for the FAI and how it's progressive and all this sort of stuff. They'll milk it, and she's the one that's driving that. So how do you quantify her value? Is it just seats in the Aviva, what they fill, or is it all the other stuff and all the other positive publicity they're getting from her and what she's doing? And their players are everywhere. Everybody's talking about the Irish women's team. So how is it only seats in the Aviva Stadium that counts? And I don't think it is. I think we should be a little bit more nuanced or realistic about what her value is and her team is. And it's the first time ever. So and again, they want to be progressive, then make a statement. Make a statement what you're willing to put your money on the table for your women's manager. I think whether she'll get equal pay to Kenny, I doubt it, but I think she should push for it.
Certainly, I don't actually know what the payments are like across international women's football, Timmy, but she can certainly make a very strong argument if Stephen Kenny is on that, then I mean you need to put me very close to top of the tree amongst my counterparts in the women's game at a minimum.
And that's where I would be advising you, Joe, that she should focus on the counterparts in the women's game across the international scene, because it could be more than what Kenny's on. She shouldn't anchor herself to Kenny, because that might be less. We just don't know. At the top level, we just don't know. Yeah. Like countries like the USA and stuff, we just don't know what they're paying. Some of the Middle Eastern countries, we don't know what they're paying at that level. But I think that the reality is she deserves to be rewarded contractually for her achievements. That's the most important point, and whatever that contract is, obviously, is up to her and her people to agree, but she deserves to be rewarded. And, the worry I have, if you say, well, she should get the same as Kenny, then the danger is that, you're linking it to, like, well, to the men's situation, and if the trapped earning millions, that won't happen. You just end up with this situation where one is linked to the other. She should be paid her market value without any question, and if that's more than Stephen Kenny, it should be more than Stephen Kenny. If it's less, it should be less. It shouldn't be saying that he gets X and I get X, and that's it. She should get what she's entitled to get across the international football, women's football world, because what she has done with this team is phenomenal. I mean, she has done an incredible job. And Tina's point about is it just fulfilling seats in the Aviva? That's a factor. There's no doubt that's a factor.
And they probably they go a long way towards, by the way, filling the Aviva come September time in their League of Nations game. So you feel like that day is coming very soon, if not this year.
And absolutely, and if you take that point, she has brought a team to a World Cup finals. That's historical, and and when she took over, they were not in any position to be going to Australia in the summer. So she deserves to be rewarded. Obviously, the contract that she was on, she felt when she signed it was appropriate. Maybe at that point, then we're on in world football, but it's definitely not appropriate now if it's out of kilter with the top managers of women's teams in the world, and she definitely needs to be paid, in the higher echelons. There's no doubts in that because of what you're. Otherwise, you lose her. That's the reality. It's professional sport. Otherwise, you lose her. And I don't believe Ireland at this stage, need to lose. Or I think they need to keep her. As you say, the Nations Cup is starting in the autumn, and she needs to build now on what will happen in the summer. And hopefully, it'll be a successful summer for us in whatever way we perform down there. And she needs to build, and we need to keep her as part of that journey for a longer period than just the end of the summer.
Okay.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.